Warm today, sunny today. Looks like we're going to have some nice weather throughout the course of this week. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend, off to a good start to that work week. And as it is, every single day, it is good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson producing the program behind the glass today. Random busy news cycle over the past, well, quite frankly, 3 days or so since you and I last spoke on Friday afternoon. A lot of news to get to concerning the University of Utah, the athletic department, the reporting of the Salt Lake Tribune and others, talking about the potential, how shall we say, change in work dynamics with the athletic department at the University of Utah. A Friday news dump, which is right out of the old textbook, and we're going to talk about it today. Some employees of the athletic department were informed that their employment status is up in the air, and they may have an opportunity to keep their job under the new entity created by the University of Utah, of course, in partnership with Ocho Capital. Here's the problem. The deal's not done. The deal between Ocho Capital and the University of Utah is not done. We don't even have the details yet, and they're not able to say anything about this, at least on the record, because the deal isn't done. The state auditor has obviously a lot of thoughts here. If you missed that, Jason Patacchio, Salt Lake Tribune, state auditor says the equity deal has, quote, significant risks. And then she laid out her concerns in an email to the University of Utah. We're going to talk about this today on the program and try to figure out what this means. Crimson Brand, the majority ownership in the company, Ocho Capital, taking what's being characterized as a minor ownership position. So right off the top, I'll just say this, this is right out of the private equity playbook. This is what they do. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be bad overall, but we'll get into it on the show today. If my voice cooperates for 4 hours, we're going to do our best to get through today. Of course, we have the NBA Finals matchup. Victor Wembanyama and the the San Antonio Spurs went in to OKC and beat the Thunder in Game 7 in their building, man. This kid's 22 years old, so he has arrived, and he's not going anywhere. So we'll get to a little bit of an NBA Finals preview today, the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks, and we can actually say we will party like it is 1999. Shout out Prince, rest in peace. Never been able to actually say that. The last time the Knicks were in the finals was 1999 when they played Tim Duncan, David Robinson, and the San Antonio Spurs. It was Duncan's first title, and this could be Victor Wembanyama's first title against the New York Knicks. So we'll get to some thoughts on what we saw, Game 7, and then we'll preview coming up on Wednesday, Game 1, Frostbank Center in San Antonio, Knicks Spurs. Of course, the Spurs have home court advantage because they had a better regular season record. We are inching closer and closer to the NBA draft, where the Utah Jazz find themselves at number 2. Walker Kessler and the Jazz apparently getting close to a deal, according to Tim Bontemps. Walker, of course, a restricted free agent with the ability to go out and hit the open market to try to find a contract, and then the Jazz decide to match. That's how this works. Gordon Hayward did it a number of years ago with the Charlotte Hornets. So a lot of NBA basketball on the show today. Myles Garrett, holy smokes, blockbuster trade. Myles Garrett is going to the L.A. Rams. The Browns looks like the Browns are going to just kind of tear it down a little bit and build for the future. But what an acquisition for the L.A. Rams. Odell Beckham Jr. is back in New York to play for the Giants. So some random offseason NFL news on the show today as well. So a lot to do on the program. Our first guest, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, joins the show today. We're going to do our weekly hit with Richard Smith, who's back from Roland Garros, where he watched the French Open. He'll be live in studio for an hour. We'll preview the NBA Finals. We'll talk some Jazz basketball and talk some NBA hoops with Smitty on the program today. More NBA basketball with Lee Ellis, our old buddy, who joins us from time to talk hoop. Roxy Bernstein will stop by tonight. We'll talk some college football, and we'll do some NHL with Roxy as well. Talk a little Utah Mammoth. And we'll go from there. So, Bill Riley, Richard Smith, Lee Ellis, Roxy Bernstein. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. And on this Monday afternoon, Porter Larson, New York Knicks fan, watching his team in the finals, basically for the first time since you've been cheering for them, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I was 5 years old, not even. I was 4 going on 5 when the Knicks were last in the NBA championship. I feel like I have like those memories that you don't know if are real or not, or if they were a dream, or if you were hallucinating. Because I remember Latrell and Pat and in the squad, but for the first real time that I get to intake it and enjoy it and understand what it is, the Knicks in the NBA Finals, almost feels a little like are they tricking us, right? After the last couple decades of Knicks fandom, but hey, I'm excited for it. I think there is an opportunity to win this NBA championship, and now I think they're the underdogs. There is no doubt about that. But I do think that it's a series that could go either way, depending on a few very key X factors that we'll get into, of course, during the course of the show and the course of the week. NFL trades, golf. We got a bunch to get to on the program today.
Are you... I think the Knicks can get 2 games. That's where I've landed. How confident are you in their ability to get this thing done?
I mean, I think that there is a realm. I'm not going to give you a game number because I think there's a realm that they can win it. Now, I think that would probably require 7 games, 6 if they're really lucky. But listen, this is a league where we have thought teams have had it wrapped up before. We have thought the torch has been passed before. We talked about Giannis the way we're talking about Wemby. And listen, I want to be clear. I think Victor Wembanyama is a generational talent who is going to be a multi-time MVP and probably a multi-time NBA champion. But it's just not as easy as talking about it. It requires, of course, staying healthy. It requires your team around you also being part of that. Now, San Antonio looks really good, but I hesitate to talk about teams and talk about players as if it's an already dynastic element, because that takes a whole collection of variables that I don't know that I've seen yet, but the one guy in the middle definitely makes it possible for San Antonio. But hey, I'm going to go like 75% chance that the San Antonio Spurs are NBA champions when we were talking a couple weeks from now. But that quarter that I leave open is, yes, when does that guy, if that guy rolls an ankle? Completely different series, right? If the Knicks can find something, because you have to try a few different things when you're defending and going up against Victor Wembanyama. And when you have a front court of Mitchell Robinson, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, I think there's actually quite a few things that you can try that can at least bother Wemby. Can at least bother him.
75%, huh? So is somebody on the prediction markets? Is that what's going on?
No, not right now.
That's exactly
and
the
definitely
number.
Not betting on the Knicks.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. All right, so we will get into a bunch of different stuff here when it comes to the NBA Finals. We got Smitty and then Lee Ellis. Riles is going to stop by. Voice of the Utes will be our first guest, but before Bill joins us, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Stores, it's time for your opening tip. Like any good coach, it's time to update the game plan for a healthy green lawn. Now that the weather is hot, it's time for IFA Spring and Summer Lawn Food for healthy turf that stays green all summer long. IFA Spring and Summer Lawn Food, it's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA.coop or at a local Utah store today. Did you hear that? Could you hear that on air?
Yeah, I could have hit your button for you, but it's okay.
No, I mean,
I like it's authentic, right?
Well, I mean, at this point, when it comes to you hitting buttons to make sure I'm not on air, we're just not going to go in that direction. So I'll handle things in here, and I want the listeners to hear when I viscerally clear my throat because it sounds rather terrifying.
Is it really 75%?
I think it was like 71.
Okay.
71, 72%. But yeah, the prediction markets are all favoring San Antonio. So is Vegas. But we do have the NBA Finals matchup now. And, throughout the course of the week, then the series, of course, we'll kind of break this thing down. But for today on a Monday, what we have to do, as they say, don't bury the lead. What happened on Saturday night is of note. Not take note Utah Jazz style. But that was a seismic moment for the landscape of pro basketball, not just for Victor Wembanyama, but in so many ways, Victor Wembanyama is exactly what the NBA needs and has been looking for a long, 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 long time. Like prior to this generation, the NBA has needed its best player to care about showing up and playing hard every night. Now, I'm not knocking on LeBron. For the most part, LeBron has done that, and he has been durable. But LeBron always lacked the thing that Kobe had. He lacked the thing that Michael had, and he lacks the thing that Wembanyama has, and that is just being a stone cold killer when the chips are on the table, when the lights are at their brightest, just being a stone cold killer. It's why people look at Michael Jordan and 6-0 in the NBA Finals, and LeBron, I think, has lost, 6 or 7 NBA Finals while winning, 4 or 5. So obviously LeBron has won at a high level, but LeBron oftentimes on the biggest and brightest stage has not delivered and then has this attitude like he didn't give a rip about losing the finals. You're going to go back to living your life and I'm going to be LeBron James. That's the air he's given off. It's not that he's not awesome. It's that he doesn't have the thing this kid has. And we haven't had the best player in pro basketball possessing the same quality that Magic did, that Michael did, that Larry did, that all of the players back in the day did. They didn't just want to beat you. They wanted to kill you. Because we have this culture now where most of the best players start playing against and oftentimes with each other when they're 11, 12, 13 years old. This incoming freshman class, Darren Peterson, A.J. DeBonsa, Cameron Boozer, Caleb Wilson, Kingston Flemings, all these kids know each other because they've been playing against each other since they were kids. And so they're all buddies. After a game, if you go to the Delta Center, after a game, once upon a time, if the Jazz lost, those players were bummed out. They didn't want to go over and shake hands. They wanted to go in the locker room. And then they wanted to go home. Now the Jazz get stomped by 30, and everyone's buddy after the game. And they're going to dinner after the game because they're friends. They know each other. And look, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but if the very basis of your business is competition, if that's what you're supposed to be built on, this is the type of attitude you want to see when you're tuned in. Because Victor Wembanyama is right now announced that he is here, and barring some sort of injury, knock on wood to this kid, he's not going anywhere for like 15 years. He's 22. And to take his team into Oklahoma City's building on Saturday night, and look, we'll be fair to Oklahoma City. Jalen Williams is probably their second best player. And after the way Chet Holmgren just kind of disappeared throughout the course of this matchup, I think it's safe to say that J-Dub is the second best player on Oklahoma City's roster. A.J. Mitchell became not just a rotational piece, but a guy that you could count on to get buckets and make plays from the wing position when J-Dub was hurt. You lose both those guys, okay? And you are asking a lot of a young Cason Wallace who actually played really well, of Jared McCain, who was just okay, of the other Jalen Williams, who gave you some nice minutes. You're asking a lot of players that aren't used to playing that type of position in that type of pressure moment when you're without 2 of your top 7 rotational pieces and without one piece that dropped a 40 burger in the finals last year. Like, that's not nothing overcome. So let's be fair. But for Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs to go into Oklahoma City and win a Game 7 on the road, therefore cementing their place in the NBA Finals, it was a seismic, historic moment for not just the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama, but the NBA as a whole. I can promise you people around the NBA think this kid is a breath of fresh air. We've been asking for maybe a decade or more, how do you fix the All-Star game? How do you fix All-Star weekend? Once upon a time, the All-Star game in the NBA was the greatest pickup game in the world because it was the best players. Once a year, we saw all the best players on the same floor in the entire world, and they competed, and it was awesome. And now there's this thing where people are too cool for it. Like, oh, it's the All-Star game. Who cares? I care because it should be awesome. It used to be, and it was for years. I care about it. And if you remember what it was like when the best players on the planet played hard against each other, then you miss it because it hasn't been around forever. And you know what happened this year? Wembanyama showed up and said, I am here to slit your throat. So LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, Ant, all those guys were like, if I If I soft foot this stuff, if I'm not playing hard, this kid is going to embarrass me on national television. So the answer to the question, how do you fix the All-Star game, is this kid. It's Victor Wembanyama. He was the answer. He fixed it. And then on Saturday night, Game 7, they're the underdog against the odds to go in that building. And his numbers don't pop out at you. He had 22 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block shot. And, you know, in order to also be fair to the Spurs, it is not just Wembanyama. Stephon Castle is a dog. Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Dylan Harper. I mean, all of these wings. And I think one of the things that's really going to be hard for New York to overcome in the finals is Jalen Brunson is 6 feet tall. Now, he's a big, thick kid, and he's physical and he's strong, and he's been able to find ways to get buckets against big defenders. But what Mitch Johnson can do on Jalen Brunson is start Stephon Castle on him, and then switch over to Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, bring in Keldon Johnson. Hell, even the Carter Bryant kid can play. Dylan Harper. And they're all like 5 inches bigger and like 10, 15, 20 pounds heavier than Jalen. It's going to be really difficult for Jalen Brunson to be the type of player he's going to need to be for the Knicks to win the series. Now, final thing before we catch a break. I thought for a minute, when I noticed Mike Brown was playing Cat at the top of the key, to kind of play a Jokic playmaker role as a pivot who can pass it. I wondered if it was in preparation potentially to see San Antonio in the finals, because you got to do everything you can to get Wembanyama away from the basket. But I ran into Steve Wojciechowski, the Jazz assistant coach, over the weekend. We were talking about this dynamic. I said, do you think Mike did that intentionally? And he said, no, they just had to take some pressure off of Jalen and win the game. But here's the problem. San Antonio runs this interesting defensive style. They invert their defense. So basically, Wembanyama is always shadowing the painted area, as Hubie Brown would like to say. So if Cat's at the top of the key, Mitch Johnson will tell Wembanyama to shadow Josh Hart, and he'll throw Devin Vassell on Cat. And then Wembanyama can kind of shadow Hart in the corner and hedge and give help if Cat posts up. And then if Cat finds Josh Hart, the problem with Wembanyama is he's so, A, smart. Okay, he's not getting enough credit for how intelligent he is. But B, generationally special as far as his measurables go. So even if he can't execute a complete closeout in the corner, he can hedge out enough to make Josh Hart think twice. I don't see how the Knicks get this done. I badly will be cheering for them. I'm actually going back to New York next week for Game 4, so I'm excited for that. But we have the NBA Finals, but the bigger story is the NBA finally has the answer to what they've been looking for a long, long time, which is the best player in this league has that thing that you got to have when it comes to that competitive nature that the old school players had. This kid has it. He has it all. And I'm excited for the Jazz to be serious next year. I just don't see anybody beating San Antonio for quite some time, barring some sort of health situation, and they've announced their arrival on the scene. Smitty's going to be live in studio, but coming up next, the voice of the Utes will bat leadoff on this lovely Monday afternoon. Bill Riley is our guest, so keep it here on ESPN 700. We have turned our calendars to June, so the dog days of summer are now basically here, but it's a very busy month in college football recruiting. So we'll do a little college football here, maybe bounce around a little bit and have some fun with the voice himself, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, on a Monday afternoon. What's up, Riles? How are you?
Spence, I'm good, but I have to take your pulse, your temperature. For the first time in 27 years, your beloved New York Knickerbockers are playing for a championship. How are you doing?
I'm thrilled. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this series. I'm actually going back to New York for Game 4 with my dad, brothers, and son. So I'm excited to have Connor see playoff basketball at MSG. This kid, Bill, this Victor Wembanyama kid is terrifying. I don't think it's a great matchup. My gut is saying San Antonio in 6, but look, this is the Knicks deserve a lot of credit, man. That's 11 straight wins in the playoffs. That's a record. And they weren't just beating teams, they were smoking them. I just think there's something different about Wembanyama. It feels like this is his time.
Well, the other thing I like about this Spurs team is, and we kind of saw it in this series, everybody plays both ends of the floor. You know, some teams that are really good defensively have 2 or 3 guys that will play, and then another 2 guys they kind of hide. It feels to me, well, obviously Wembanyama is the great eraser. He is the guy that can take care of everything, but it just feels like San Antonio's guys buy in on both ends of the floor. You don't get a sense that a couple of those guys are just out there chucking it around.
Yeah, and look, these young wings, they are dogs. Stephon Castle is an absolute dog, and Jalen Brunson's 6 feet, Bill. I mean, I've met the kid. He's not much taller than I am, and they've got 4 or 5 wings that are between 6'4" and 6'8", and they're gonna sick a bunch of players on Jalen, and he's gonna have a tough time, I think. I mean, these days, if you're a 6-foot guard, you don't really have a home in the NBA, which speaks to Jalen's brilliance as a ball in hand offensive creator and playmaker. But I don't know, man. I think the Garden's going to be crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if home court serves and San Antonio gets them at 7.
Okay, here's my hypothetical for you. I could guarantee you one of these 2 things today. I want to see which one you would choose. I could guarantee you the Knicks championship, or I could guarantee you the Jets will play in a Super Bowl within 2 years.
Well, you know me. I like a guarantee. Okay, let's start there. I would take.
Well, you are the Dick Pepperfield of ESPN 700.
That's definitely an insult, but I would take the Knicks winning a championship. I mean, with how much we invested, it was life or death for 10 years. The Jets were always kind of like a side team to cheer for, and they were such a joke. I never really expected much out of them. So for me, I'd take a Knicks championship.
All right, maybe better question here. Is this Knicks team better talent-wise, better put together than those teams that you grew up with, 94 and 99?
Such a good question, and I would probably lean yes, but okay. I don't think anyone on this team is generational the way Ewing was. Jalen has a chance to be. And look, I begrudgingly cheer for Cat now. I'm not a big Cat guy. I didn't love the deal. There's something, he's so corny. There's just something about him that kind of rubs me the wrong way. But one of the issues that those Knick teams had back in the day, I loved Charlie Ward, but he was a mid-table type point guard, or Chris Childs or Derek Harper. It was physical, defensive basketball based off of how big and strong they were. Now, the Houston and Spree years were a little bit different, but that Starks, Oakley, Mason, Anthony Bonner, Patrick Ewing, that era, they were just beating you up. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the scores, like the Knicks Heat series, the Knicks would win 72-68, dude, Yeah. So they didn't necessarily have a lot of transcendent wing talent. I would begrudgingly say that this is probably as talented of a Knick team as there have been since the teams in the 70s that actually won the thing.
I agree. I think those teams were markedly more tough. They were just tougher, more physical, would want to get in the alley with you team. But I think this team has got more basketball talent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Here's a question. So we're debating, Game 4, we'll all be there. We're debating whether or not we should get Knick jerseys. What's your thought about a grown man wearing another man's jersey?
Not a big fan of it. If you got Knick jerseys, I would say just get a Knicks jersey. Not a big fan of wearing another man's name across my back. So some people are into that. Not my thing. Also not a big fan of, you see this a lot at Jazz games, the guys that are wearing the dress shirt with the jersey over the top of it.
No way. Yeah, no chance.
Not a good look. See, I could see your dad maybe doing that because your dad's very professional, probably coming from the office, meeting you guys at the Garden. But if you or your brothers and Connor wore the dress shirt underneath, we'd have to have a discussion.
Yeah, no chance. Connor's young enough where he could do like the hooded sweatshirt with the jersey over it. I think he could probably pull that off.
Are you guys going to be guests of James Dolan?
My guess is we will probably be part of the facial recognition operation that he has. I think we will all be watched very closely, Bill.
You along with Charles Oakley, right?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, we should just invite Oak. We should just have
How
Oakley.
Great would that be? You and your dad and Oak all sitting together like 3 rows behind Dolan.
That is such a good idea. But I would imagine we'd be ejected rather quickly, and I'd like to kind of stay for the entire game. But by the way, while we're in this space, what was you grew up during a difficult time for the teams that you cheered for, and then in the modern day, a lot of them have been very good. What was the Bill Riley fandom ultimate experience that you had?
Well, when my fandom was growing, the Royals were fantastic. I went to 2 World Series in 80 and 85, went to the playoffs in 77, 79, 80, and then they hit like a 25-year just death period. The Chiefs, when I was growing up, were not very good. And then when I got to college, that's when Marty Schottenheimer and Derek Thomas and Neil Smith. So, and they went through they were always good, but they couldn't get over the hump. So I had a weird fan. I mean, I was always a fan, but I was hooked early with the Royals being good and then punished for 25 years. And then the Chiefs were terrible and then broke my heart for many years, and now they've been really good. So that's kind of been I had kind of like you, I had long periods of drought of winning with my teams, which, as you know, like if the Knicks win it this year, I mean, they haven't won a championship in your lifetime, Spence. I think 72, right, was
Correct.
the last Knicks championship.
72, 73, yeah.
You were just a gleam in the eye of Dave and Deb at the time, who were probably in high school in Bountiful. But, it just makes it sweeter when your team finally wins, and that's why I'm rooting. I've never done this before, but I am openly rooting for your Knicks so you can enjoy a nice championship run because – you had so many rough years with the Yankees, only winning every 4 or 5, 6 years growing up.
Yeah, they were my saving grace. Excellent Checketts genealogy knowledge, Bill. Well done there. And I appreciate your support for my New York Knicks. We'll see. I mean, look, you know what it's like when you do this job, and I'm now 20 years in. The fan does die in you a little bit. So the things that happen while you're covering the things you need to do that kind of remind you why you're doing what you do and why it was fun back in the day, they're always kind of fun reminders,
Well, and two, it's not a team that you cover on a regular basis. It's different when you have to be a little bit more objective and cover the team on a regular basis like you do with the teams in this area. When, like me, the Royals and the Chiefs, they're 700, 800 miles away, and this isn't a market for that. So it's easier for me to be – and it's kind of fun, too, when you do it for so long to kind of dip back in and be a fan a little bit. And it's really cool that you guys get to – which game are you going to, Game 4?
Game 4, yeah. Heading up to Portland for a wedding, so I'm not available for Game 3, so I'm going to head out for Game 4 next week.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can't wait. Hey, I wonder – and look, it's not a done deal – but the new information about just how many bets Brendan Sorsby placed, like 90K over the course of a few years, using sportsbooks accounts of friends and family members. He's got a very powerful attorney. Jeffrey Kessler is the Michael Jordan of sports attorneys. But the injunction they filed was summarily dismissed. His 2-hour hearing took place today. I just don't see a world where this kid plays college football, Bill. So give me your thoughts on that, and then what do you think that does to the landscape of the Big 12 next season?
There are very few no-nos, especially in today's day and age, Spence. I mean, where a lot of the rules that were tried and true so many years ago for coaches, administrators, I think those have gone by the wayside. So things that got players and coaches and schools in trouble 10, 15, 20 years ago, they're not against the rules anymore. But this one has been the one you couldn't do and you still can't do. And you go into any facility, whether it's Utah or BYU or Texas Tech or Indiana where Brendan Sorsby was, and there's signs all over the place that and they lecture you at the beginning of a school year. They bring somebody in, every school does it, that says that you can't gamble. You can't do it. You can't have the apps. You can't do it. And so he knew it, and he did it, and it wasn't a one-off or a two-off, as you said. It was hundreds and hundreds of bets over a year and a half, 2 years, $90,000 worth. I mean, it's just I don't know how you can allow this to happen, because then what you've done is you've set a precedent and you've opened the door, and I just don't think that's a door that a judge or the NCAA or anybody wants opened. Brendan Sorsby, did he make a mistake? He did, certainly, but it was a repeated mistake over and over again when he sat through many lectures, I'm sure, from Indiana to Cincinnati to other places that said you can't do it. So I would. Jeffrey Kessler is a fantastic attorney. He's the go-to guy. He's the Johnny Cochran of sports attorneys that you want on your side when you feel like you've been wronged. But I would be very surprised if this Lubbock County District Court comes back with anything, a temporary injunction or anything else. I think this kid's going to have to turn his attention to the NFL, where, will it be a red flag for some NFL teams? It probably will a little bit, but if he shows some contrition and does the interviews right, he'll probably play in the NFL. But I'd be very surprised if he takes a snap of football for Texas Tech this fall.
Yeah, I feel like, killing the kid's chances of having a life and a career, that's too punitive. So hopefully somebody in the NFL will give him a pathway. You check these boxes and we'll take a chance on you, and you show us that you're serious about it. But as it pertains to I hate making this a football topic, but we have to talk about what it means for Texas Tech. Now, Vegas, prediction markets, odds still say they're the team to beat, and I tend to lean that way. I think they've earned that. We all know what Will Hammond can do. We saw it up close. He's coming off an ACL. But does this, in your opinion, Bill, change the way we should look at the landscape of Big 12 football this year?
I think my hierarchy in the spring, Spence, has been before this and even a little bit after Texas Tech, because they've got a very loaded roster. They've gone out again this year and added really good players. BYU and Utah, but I think that grouping is very much closer now. I think Texas Tech has come back. I think these teams are all certainly in the mix. I think they should still be the three favorites. You mentioned somebody very important there. That's Will Hammond. Utah fans probably remember Will Hammond as a guy that came in for Baron Morton and basically with his legs and a little bit with his arm led Texas Tech to that win in the second half against the University of Utah. Had Baron Morton not gotten hurt, Utah might have won that game, but Hammond was really good. He tore his ACL a couple of weeks later. Apparently his rehab's going very well. He's very good. They were saying last year the worst thing that could happen to other teams is if Morton went out because Hammond was better. Well, he's scheduled to miss probably the first 3 games of the year, Spence, but those are winnable games. They just are. Texas Tech plays Abilene Christian unless they buy out of that game and somehow – They play Texas and try to shut up Steve Sarkisian's mouth a little bit. That's, all that went on last week. But it's Abilene Christian, Oregon State. And then, I take that back. Houston's the 3rd game, not the 4th. So it could become a little tricky, and Houston's good. But I think if Will Hammond comes back, they're still a really good team. But in the meantime, I think that group of 3 at the top are very good. And I think they're pretty clustered to me. I don't think there's a huge difference, especially with the quarterback situation between Utah, BYU, and Texas Tech.
I understand why the Tech folk were a little peeved at what Sark said, but, dude, he's not wrong. Like, Tech's schedule is ridiculous, Bill. They really should waltz into the Big 12 championship game.
I agree with that, but coming from Steve Sarkisian, who had a top 5 team last year and he missed the playoff, coming from a school that only won the Big 12 like twice in 30 years, Texas is one of those teams annually that everybody hypes up, and then in recent years they've kind of fallen to the wayside. It would have meant a little bit more had Texas actually been in the playoff last year and won a game or at least made the playoff, but they weren't. So, yeah, you can throw a little shade, and, yeah, that's a soft non-conference schedule. Is the SEC top to bottom better than the Big 12? Yeah, it probably is. But, go out and do – if Kirby Smart is saying that, okay. If Kalen DeBoer is saying that, okay. But Sark his nickname was 7-6 Sark when he was at Washington. He doesn't have this glowing postseason resume, so it rang a little bit hollow.
So while it feels a little WWE, according to Yahoo, it would be $2.4 million for Tech in Texas to buy out the opponents on September 5th and play. I think they should do it, dude. I think college football should capitalize on this and see how these two teams stack up. That would be excellent live television.
Cody Williams is worth billions of dollars. He has helped them build that roster. He said he would pay the buyout. I'm sure Texas has some big oil billionaire on their rolls too. Those two guys come together, play that game at Jerry World in Dallas, let them split the proceeds. It's 99,000. Texas will probably have a few more people there, but not that many more. Spence, how good would that be for college football? How good would that be for Saturday, September the 5th, to kind of kick off the early season? And you're right, it does feel like WWE, WWF stuff from back in the day. But if it could come to fruition, I think how many people would be watching that game? What would the build-up to that game be like? Big Fox would be there. ESPN would be there. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and quite frankly, for the Big 12 to receive any sort of national respect, someone in the Big 12 is going to have to go start knocking off the big dogs in the SEC and the Big 10 because we all thought Tech was awesome last year, and obviously Oregon just undressed them. So I know that there's some non-con opportunities, Arkansas and stuff, and some other teams will have some lesser opportunities to play some SEC and Big 10 schools. But we've got to see the Big 12 schools take on the biggest and baddest teams in those two conferences and have some success if the Big 12 ever wants to get any sort of traction here.
I would love to see, Spence, the Power Four conferences do what we see in basketball. You know how we see the ACC Big 10 Challenge and the SEC Big 12 Challenge? I would love – maybe it's not every school every year. Maybe it's 6 schools one year, 6 schools the next year. But I would love to see that in this day and age where we're talking about televisions and we're talking about, adding conference games. If we're going to expand the playoff, make some meaningful games and get some of that going early because – to me, that enhances the resume. It brings more. And if you're going to expand the playoffs to 16 or 24, playing one of those non-conference games early doesn't hurt you as much because a 3-loss team can get themselves into a college football playoff where now 2-loss teams, as we saw with Utah and BYU and others last year, don't make it into a 12. If you double the size of the playoff, there's no reason why these Power 4 leagues especially can't play more meaningful games in September.
And the Big 12, the coaches okayed the preference for the 24-team CFP. We know that's what the Big 10 wants, and now we're just waiting on the SEC. But those spring meetings have come and gone. It feels like we're going towards the direction of a 24-team college football playoff, Bill. If we do, what are your thoughts?
I can be sold on it, Spence. I'm not a huge fan right now. I would love to see them take that next step to maybe 16 to see how it goes. But if it does become inevitable that they go to 24, the one thing that I don't really want, which Petiti and the Big Ten have been pushing for a while, I don't want the auto bids. I don't want the SEC to be guaranteed 6 and the Big Ten to be guaranteed 6 and the Big 12 and the ACC get guaranteed 3. I would like to see, in theory, the 24 best teams get in. What if there's a year where the SEC is down a little bit or the Big Ten's down a little bit and they only deserve 3 teams? And there's that outlier year where the ACC or the Big 12 deserve 4 or 5 teams. There's a reason why you have the committee. The NCAA basketball tournament doesn't guarantee the Big East or the ACC or the SoCon any number of schools. Let that committee do their work and let them pick the best 22, 23 schools with maybe a group of 5 guarantee in there. Like I said, I hate the idea of doubling the size of the field this quickly. But if it does go that way, the one thing I would say is please don't. I don't like just the idea of guaranteeing conferences so many teams every year.
But just to be clear, you would like a guarantee.
But much like Dick Pepperfield, I would like a guarantee.
Well, you're kind of sounding like a jive turkey at this point, just so you know. I gotta rewatch that, man. It's been a minute. I had forgotten about it before we kind of were bantering back and forth. Hey, give us a quick update or whatever you have. I referenced it is June, which for most college football fans isn't necessarily the month that you kind of look at, but it's a big deal for recruiting. So these coaches are really hitting the road. I know you're up in the football facility. Could you just kind of give us the vibe up there? What's it like right now?
Well, they were off a little bit the last week or two before I was there. They're back at it now. They're in summer conditioning and things like that. I haven't had a chance to catch up with a lot of the coaches because when I went by last week, there wasn't anybody around, or at least the time I was up there. So I'm hoping when I get over there this week to record my podcast, Crimson Corner, and some other stuff, that I'll get a chance to do it. But now in this day and age, you're right. June, if you follow the college football recruiting path, it's now become one of the busiest, if not the busiest months, because these kids all want to get it over and done now. I mean, I would say 75, 80% of the high school kids are committing now in the summer so they could play their senior year and be done with it. That doesn't mean the recruiting process ends because they can't sign till December anyway. But I think a lot of these kids want to get it over with. It's easier to schedule visits in the summertime. I don't think kids are as hot to necessarily go to a game. You can always come back on an unofficial visit and do a game. But I think a lot of these programs, and the kids in particular, they can have a little bit more time and spend a little bit more time and not be as distracted in the summertime. So it's going to be interesting to see this month what both Utah and BYU and some of the other Big 12 schools are able to get done in recruiting.
Last week, Congress announced the Protect College Sports Act. Your doppelganger, Ted Cruz, and then Maria Cantwell worked on it. That was mean. I'm sorry. But here are the four just quick bullet points. Limiting, that dude he's so weird looking. Limiting athletes to transferring schools only one time without penalty. Excuse me. Limiting athlete eligibility to a maximum of 5 years. Prohibiting former pros to play in college because duh. And then prohibiting schools from poaching a coach from another school during their sports season. Just give me your thoughts, just generally speaking, on those four bullet points. And then I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the biggest problem that college football is facing right now?
Well, I think the proposal sounds great, Spence. I mean, all those four bullet points you just gave seem to be pretty commonsensical deals, right? They all seem to be, when you say them on the surface, you're like, well, yeah, you shouldn't be able to poach a coach when he's in the middle of his season, but it happens. Should pro athletes be playing college sports 3 years after they were in college? No. But these are all things that happen. So it all seems very commonsensical. My biggest question is, how does it get enforced? Because that's really my big question with a lot of this stuff. We've seen all this talk about only so much money and using your rev share and things like this, but we see schools openly flaunting, moving around the rules and things like that. So my question is, it's great in theory, but how is it in practice and who enforces it? And that's the big thing for me. It's great. If they can get this pushed through, great, cool. But how are you going to stop it from happening? Who's going to be the party that enforces that, and what are the penalties if it happens? That's the big thing for me. But all the rest of it seems pretty common sense. To me, if I was starting with anything, I would probably start with the portal stuff. I would probably I'm all for a kid getting a chance to move, but I don't like the annual free agency. If you want to move once for free, that's great. If your coach leaves, that's great, whatever that might happen to be. But you shouldn't be able to move every year without it. It's hard for program building, but it also, I don't know that overall it's good for the kid either, because ultimately you're still supposed to be going to school. And I don't know if you're really focusing that much on your school if you're moving annually from a different program to a different program. So that would be where I would probably want to start it if that were me. I've got a question for you, though.
What do you got?
What did you make of the U.S. men's national team yesterday, and what did you make of the play of your doppelganger, Tim Ream?
Oh, that's pretty good. He's also a goofy-looking dude. I did have the man bun at one point. Your boy was chasing.
That's why I said it. So
yeah, your boy was chasing birdies, Riles. I just caught highlights.
Okay. When they had their mostly first 11 out there, they looked really good. It was kind of what I think we've been hoping to see for a couple of years with this young group of players. Now, he kind of messed around and made 10 subs at halftime, and I don't know how seriously he took the second half. And Senegal is a World Cup qualifying. They're playing in the World Cup, so it wasn't like you beat up on, Trinidad and Tobago or somebody like that. That was a good team. So, again, it's early. We've seen this before, but I kind of feel better about the boys right now and everybody being pretty healthy and the form they're in. They look good yesterday.
We got Germany coming up, I think, with the next friendly. That'll be an interesting litmus test. What I was asked this over the weekend. You always hear, like, let's just get out of the group and see what happens in the knockout stage. Not here, not in this region. I say 2002 quarterfinals. Our guy Clinton Mathis. What do you expect from them in this World Cup cycle?
I didn't expect a lot. But the more I've read, the more they seem to be in a good spot if they stay healthy. I think that they win their group, Spence, and I think they win one game. I think they win one knockout round game and then go down. That's my guess. Kind of what you just said. Kind of that 0-2, where who ended up beating them in 0-2? Was it South Korea, or did they beat South Korea?
They beat
I can't remember
Mexico.
Who that was.
Oh man, I forgot as well. I'll look it up.
But yeah, that was the good run with Mathis. Kind of the end of Brian
McBride.
It was the early days of Donovan and Beasley and those guys. So I think playing at home, being here, this group, I think they win their group. I think they win their first knockout round game and then lose in that second knockout round game. What about you?
I want them to go to the quarterfinals. I'm going to just say expecting them to go to the quarterfinals for all the investment in infrastructure. And this is supposed to be the golden generation. And all these players are playing in the Bundesliga and even in the Premiership. Like, step up. Now that the World Cup is being played here, it's a massive opportunity. I mean, in 1994, when it was here, it directly led to the creation of MLS. So, like, show some pride, step up, and then fulfill these expectations. Nobody's asking you to go win the thing. I mean, America essentially was a century late to even starting the sport. So, look, it's going to be Spain, Brazil, France. One of those countries is going to win it. But go to the quarters, man. That's what I'm going to put out there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, most of our best players are starting on high-level European clubs. This is not some foreign spot for these guys. The guys that they're matching up with on the pitch, they see week in and week out when they're playing. So I'm with you. I think advancing in this tournament, not finishing second in your group and then hoping to win. I don't think a quarterfinal is out of the realm of possibility. Anything after that, I think, is gravy. But you got to win. I think this is the time you've got to win, because at some point in time, you've got to deliver on what the promises have been of this quote unquote golden generation.
One more thing, Bill, and I'll set you loose, because you referenced the nature of college athletics, where players just come and go every year, and it makes it hard for a community to get to know players the way that we used to back in the day. The Alex Smiths, the Eric Weddles, the Andre Millers, the Britton Johnsons. Why don't we just do the most obvious thing possible and rip the Band-Aid off and say this is professional sports? Amateurism was always a farce, and now it's not even a thing. Let these guys unionize, okay, collectively bargain, and have them sign contracts. A 2-year contract with a third year option, the understanding that if you're an NBA player that you can go to the draft, if you're an NFL player, you can go to the draft. But if you're going to commit to the University of Utah, here's a 3-year deal, okay? Sign a 3-year deal, and we agree that if you're an NFL player, there's an option in your contract to go to the draft. Like, why? What is stopping us from doing what I think is the most logical solution to this entire thing?
Well, it feels like that's the direction it's trending in, that we're going in. I don't know whether that's 3, 5, 10 years from now, but that feels like where we're at without the contracts now. I guess my big question would be, who oversees this? Who's the governing body? Who's the one that organizes this on the collegiate side of it? Because I don't think it can be done on a school-by-school basis, Spence. I think it has to be done by kind of an in the end, we all know the NCAA is not that organization. They're not designed for that. So what's that going to look like? Are we talking about football only? Are we talking about football, basketball? Are we talking about all sports? And who oversees that? I think that, to me, is where it comes from. And then the players have to unionize, but who's negotiating this? What's the organization that do? I mean, obviously the schools would do that, but there's got to be a big overreaching I think, organization that oversees it all. And I don't know who that is at this point in time. But to your point, that feels like the direction this is heading, whether that's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, because in some ways it kind of feels like that's where we're at right now.
It's coming up on the Crimson Corner podcast hosted by Bill Riley. And where can listeners go get the show?
Wherever you guys get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iTunes, there's a YouTube link for Utah Athletics on YouTube. You can get all that stuff. It usually drops on Wednesday. Last week, C.J. Crone, probably the best baseball player in Utah baseball history. We've had football players on as of late. We're going to have coaches and things like that this summer. So it's good stuff. It's usually what's going on and kind of a walk down memory lane with former great athletes at the University of Utah. I do a little stuff at the beginning talking about issues of the day like college football playoff and other stuff like that. So it's all good, and I appreciate it, Spence.
All right, Riles, thanks for the time, man. Be good. Chat soon.
Take care.
Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. I always appreciate his time. Go grab that Crimson Corner podcast. If you're a fan of Utah athletics and you want the inside scoop, that's the best place to go. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Richard Smith is going to join us coming up live in studio. Our buddy Lee Ellis will roll by. We'll do a little hockey later with Roxy Bernstein. So a lot to do. Busy Monday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. A little bit of breaking news on the show. The long-rumored trade has gone down between the Eagles and the Patriots. A.J. Brown is headed to New England. The Patriots are going to get the Eagles will get a first-round draft pick in 2028 and a fifth-round pick in 2027. So A.J. Brown is a member of the Patriots. Myles Garrett is a member of the L.A. Rams. Some random NFL offseason news. You know, Porter and I are just two humble guys swinging the pick in the salt mines, working hard every day. And then some people get to travel internationally and head on over to Paris to enjoy their life. So it's good to be Richard Smith, as I often say. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yep, I love it, Spence. But I love the setup because you just, some guys just can't help themselves from setting themselves up. Because you're coming at me. That's fine.
I'm complimenting you.
I have nothing to hide behind because you're 100% accurate. I said, and this is coming from the guy working the salt mines who is taking a few days off next week to go to MSG to see a playoff game with his dad and a bunch of his family members, and that's a tough gig. I know that you have to do that, and that's something that you have to grind at, and so I feel for you in that regard.
Yeah, it's tough. I got to take a red eye. Not looking forward to that. It's tough. It's hard. I'm gonna be tired and groggy.
Well, those lay down seats though, you'll get a good 5-6 hours.
No, it's a private plane.
There you go. There you go. I know they're sending it for you. I know that. Yeah.
How was it, man? You have a good time.
You know what? Roland Garros was great. I'll tell you what, Spence. We were there for 8 days. We were there the whole first week, and in Paris last week. Just the luck of the draw. We were there for the hottest week in recorded history in Paris in the month of May. Everybody who lives there was telling us, it's never like this. It's like in the low 60s. Last week it was 62, and it was drizzly and rainy and overcast. And the day we walked off the plane, boom, it's 88 and sunny and humid, and it was like that, 90 degrees every day. The tennis was hot. The biggest cheers you got at Roland Garros was in between sets when the guys would come out and they'd water down the courts, right, the clay, which they usually do, and they'd brush them and roll them and even it out for the next set. And the biggest cheer was when the guys would be out there with the hose, and then they'd turn around and they'd spray the hose on the fans, and the fans would be going crazy because that's what they were waiting for, because it was that hot and dry the whole week. But we had a great time, great atmosphere there in Paris. That was a lot of fun for Linda and I to be able to do that.
Well, happy for you. That's good stuff. Certainly looks like a fun event on television. I've never attended it. Let's start out by giving your boy a little love, Devin Tovey.
Devin Tovey. Hey, let me tell you something. Devin Tovey, my good friend, he and I have been golfing all his life since he was 8 years old, and he asked me if I would take him golfing someday, and he was taught by his grandpa a lot of his golfing knowledge, and just grasped onto the sport, and it was great when he was 9 and 10, we'd go golfing, and I'd be letting him drive the golf cart and all that kind of stuff, and the stuff that's real fun when you're that age, and then he started growing up, and he started beating me when he was 12 and 13, and then people would say, man, hey, Devin's playing really well in high school. He was an all-stater at Highland and went and played college golf, and now works for Impact Golf down in Sandy, and is a fitter out there, and has been playing a lot of the local tournaments, and won the Salt Lake City Amateur this weekend.
Nice.
Up at Bonneville. Got in a playoff, in the first playoff hole on number 1 that you know well, that long uphill par 5, and he cranked a drive and then stuck a 9-iron from 165 yards in his second shot to like 5 feet of the pin, and was able to roll it in for an eagle to win the tournament. So but happy for him. He's been grinding a lot of years at all these local tournaments trying to win a prestigious event like that. So happy for him.
Good for him. Have you ever played in a tournament before? Have you ever played any tournament golf?
No. This is the thing. Friends of ours would say, hey, Devin's getting really good at golf, like when he was a teenager and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you must be teaching him a lot,
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, this is exactly how it goes. Devin is a really smart kid. So what he does is he watches me, and then he does exactly the opposite of what I'm doing, because this is the old George Costanza rule, right?
Yep.
If what I'm doing doesn't work, then I should do the opposite. So whatever Smitty's doing, I will do the opposite, because obviously that must work better than what he's doing.
Yeah.
And here he is today.
That's awesome. Good for him. I'll tell you what. Those ex-college guys are a different level because I told you I went down to St. George to play in a qualifier.
Yeah, I know.
They stuck me with an ex-Ute and an ex-Cougar. One was 26, one was 32. And if I smoke my drive, I'll get you 270, 280, right?
Yeah,
They didn't even stop to say hi, right? It's like it's a wild experience. It's a pressure-packed thing, but playing in a tournament. I'd never done it before.
Hey, and you get, Spence, those guys who've been playing a lot and are cranked into that kind of stuff. Now you get to that professional level, even if it's one of the satellite leagues or something like that. Those guys or like in the Korn Ferry Tour, who are very good players. Those guys are right on the same level as all the PGA guys. That difference is so paper thin, and sometimes it's a missed putt from 5 feet where you don't qualify to get into the next thing, to get to the next thing, to get your car, that kind of thing. There's so many guys who could be doing it, and it's just so many out there that that difference is so minute, and you just have to be dialed in constantly to just be able to have some measure of success.
Yeah, in a way, it's not that different than trying to analyze basketball talent, right? Like the worst player on an NBA roster could go in any gym and drop 50.
Yeah, well, and in recent years you'd hear these arguments about, I don't know, when Florida won back-to-back national championships, or Villanova or something, and people would say, yeah, those guys could give an NBA team a run for their money, and you'd go, okay,
just give me a break.
Okay,
yeah.
Please, because it's such a different level, and that's what you get in golf. And in golf, it stands out, Spence, because every guy is on an island by himself or herself, and nobody cares about you except you, and you got to figure it out yourself, and that's why I'm so happy for Devin in his victory yesterday in the Salt Lake City Amateur, because they went to that first playoff hole, and he was playing a guy who was a little bit older than him and more experienced, and he cranked that second shot. That's a lot of pressure. You're trying to win your first, local tournament like in that level.
Yeah.
And you produce something like that, that gets it done under pressure like that. Good for him. Happy for him. But I appreciate you letting me shout him out on that.
For sure. Devin, if you're listening, nice job, man. That's not a small accomplishment, or if anybody's listening, they can pass it on to him. When you were describing the opponent of Devin's hitting that false front and watching his golf ball slowly roll down I can't even tell you how many times
I can't either. Spence, look, I don't care where the pin is that's up there on that first green of Bonneville.
Yeah.
That number 5, we all know it's a 2-tier green. It's got a big hill and a false front. And I don't care where the pin is. I'm always trying to just put it up on that second level just so it sits somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, even if the pin's in the front, all right, it's going to roll off and it's going to roll down.
Right.
I'm going to be chipping back up, whatever. But that thing is so difficult to get to, and to do it under pressure in a tournament like that and stick something, that's meaningful, with all that on the line. I wish I could do that someday just once.
For sure. Yeah. Congrats to Devin. All right.
Hey, how about your guy Brendan Sorsby, by the way? You mentioned him
wait,
before.
hold on. What?
You mentioned
Wait,
him.
how is he my guy?
No, this is this is how we do things. We like a shuck and jive here. We fake left, we go
You've
right.
been watching more George Carlin on the plane, didn't you?
No, I just want to say a 10-second thing. Brendan Sorsby, I don't know him.
Yeah.
I don't watch him last year at Cincinnati. I know his whole deal at Indiana and the whole thing. This betting thing, okay? That seems like, to me, my opinion, a guy that I don't care what he is, what his talent is, that you couldn't trust him anywhere to do anything going forward for a team, to be a leader of a team. Because in college, just like in the pros, they tell you, Spence, 1,000,000 times, you can't do this. Don't do it. There's signs in the locker room. There's signs in the shower room. There's signs walking down the hallway. Everybody knows it. Okay, you slip up once. Some guy says, hey, I can get you some money. You can make a bet on the Super Bowl, whatever it is. This guy went dozens and dozens and dozens of time to do it. He was just telling everybody, hey, I got your rule right here. That's what he was saying to everybody. And when you do it once or twice, okay, that's one of those things that falls under that rule of, shame. You fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame, right? That's that saying. Like, he was doing it so much, and that's doesn't ever play again, whatever. I don't know how you ever trust a guy like that who was blatantly flaunting against all the rules and said, "Oh, the rules don't apply to me." You know, I mean, what is that?
Yeah. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
There you go.
I should really utilize that in my dating life, but we won't talk about that right now.
Here we go.
No,
let's go.
But let's stay in this space for a minute, because do you really feel like this kid's ability to have a career in pro football should be completely taken away? Or is there a team out there that would say, look, we like your talent. We understand that you got loose with some stuff, because there's an entire medical side of this, that gambling is a dopamine hit the same way a heroin injection is. So if you believe that he was addicted to gambling, like people get addicted to drugs or food or your phone or alcohol or whatever it is, if you believe that, isn't there a path for him to get well and potentially continue his career? I mean, I would hope somebody would give him at least a chance. And if you can't check the boxes, then you just kind of throw your hands up.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, Spence. And look, that can be the case with him. But the issue is that the kid knows, from my perspective, that I don't care if he was betting $5 a game. Okay, he knows he's not supposed to be doing it. Period. And then he does it again and then again and again and again and just flaunting it in the way that it looks, all the information we have. And you're right, it can be a disease, it can be something. That's what his famous lawyer, Jeffrey Kessler, is going to argue up and down, and is going to try and get him off on some kind of technicality that way. But if I'm a team, unless I'm convinced that he's some version of Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or something, and I'm gonna be the guy to save him or something, I don't think I can, if I'm an owner or general manager, that I can trust a guy who's, no matter what the rules are, this guy's already shown me that he doesn't care about what the rule is. He's going to do what he wants to do. So when we have team rules, we have stuff we're supposed to be doing as a group. You're supposed to be one of our leaders, all this and this and this. I don't know. That just sounds to me like someone who's, that there would be better options for an organization to look at. I'm just surprised that it came out the way that it did come out, and that Texas Tech is sitting there going, really? Like, now we're dealing with this stuff, whatever, and everybody's trying to build up these walls or something about it, and I don't know. It just the whole thing is distasteful, but okay,
Yeah, the college career is over. I don't see how.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's zero way. I think you have a pathway to. And look, this is his last year of eligibility.
Right.
So I don't see any way that you can allow him to play college football. I do wonder, though, and you referenced the unfortunate double standard here comes down to talent. I mean, Ray Lewis killed a guy. Like, let's just call it how it is, and he's freaking Ray Lewis, so one of the best middle linebackers of all time. But, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the double standard of, if you're a generational talent, then we're going to overlook this stuff. Yeah. If you're just a medial talent, then suddenly it's a situation where you can't play.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Spence, I'm one of those guys who I think that's the rules you have to follow, and if you're a leader, you're one of the guys who sets the tone for the team. The Fernando Mendoza type guys who's on his, in Indiana. But let me say this: I'm also a Pete Rose Hall of Fame guy. I don't care what he was doing, betting on games or betting. He was a voracious bettor. And I read the book on him. He didn't care. It was the same thing. He didn't care about who was saying what. The rules didn't apply to him. He was always betting on his team, never bet against his team. Okay, I bet on my team to win because I think we're going to figure out a way to win tonight, whatever. But Pete Rose did that all the time, but he was always – he had a routine in spring training. He loved spring training, Spence, because he could go betting at 3 different places after an afternoon spring training game.
Wow.
He would go to the horses in the afternoon. He would go to the dogs. And then he would go gambling at a sports book in Florida. 3 different locations. He had a driver, a guy who would be scheduled. This is the schedule. The game's over at 2:30. I'll be in the car at 3. We go to the dog track. We're there till 5. Then you take me over to the horses before they finish at 6:30. And then we go grab something to eat before we go over to the sports book and we bet on the games.
See, that sounds like an illness to me.
Right. But he was unabashed about that and whatever. But having said that, 4,200 hits and what he did in Major League Baseball, being an all-star at 5 different positions. It's not a Hall of Fame for guys who are saints or guys who are priests or whatever. It's a Hall of Fame for what you did in your sport, right? And he was the best who ever did it. That's my opinion. And, but that's where I conflict myself about how I feel about those kind of things.
Fair enough. I mean, I think multiple layers of contextualized conversations about these things, it's an appropriate way to talk about it because no two situations are alike. The message that's sent is if you are a transcendent talent, you are allowed to do things that people less talented than you are not allowed to do. And I don't love that.
How does the money he was getting, this NIL stuff, how does that play into what he felt like he was allowed? In other words, if he's a football player 10 years ago in college football, doesn't have any money, is he going to be betting like that?
Yeah.
Or is he betting like that because I got money, so I can do this? I don't know.
Well, it brings into play a much larger societal conversation where we are playing with fire to give children whose brains are not fully developed big checks.
Good point.
And then the ability on their phone to download a sportsbook app, to have at their disposal at all times, and have, again, that what the scientific community and the ability to brain map, what they've been able to unveil and reveal is what dopamine hits are.
Yeah.
And what brings you that dopamine sensation, that feeling. And you can map it out in someone's brain. If you win a big bet on DraftKings, the dopamine effect that your brain goes through is the same effect if you inject heroin into your vein. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can see that with brain mapping. Yeah. Now, as you age, you start to make better choices and you learn from certain things here or there because you're a fully developed human. But as somebody who in his life has made some very questionable choices, I can tell you as a young person, sometimes it's hard to make your way through life. I think we're setting up these young men to fail in so many different ways when suddenly they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their bank account and then they can just transfer it to a sports book and then place a bunch of different bets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's like a perfect storm. And I just think the societal impact, when we look back on this generation in 20 or 30 years, I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this perfect confluence of events have affected them.
Yeah, well, what's interesting to me is obviously he was doing all this stuff and with different people, different guys who had accounts, whatever it was, and that anybody he knows that dude, you're not supposed to be doing this, right? Mm-hmm. You know that, right?
Yeah.
And you're telling me nobody told him, hey, dude, come on, man. You got something else bigger going on.
It's hard to know, though, Smitty. I mean, he just has it on his phone. I mean, maybe he's not talking to anybody about it.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know
much about it either. Yeah, I know.
All right, here's what we'll do. We'll catch a break. And coming up next, I actually want to continue this conversation in this direction. June 23rd is right around the corner. We got a draft cycle ahead of us. You're a guy who interviewed prospects and oftentimes would talk to these young men. I mean, how much of these boxes have to be checked before you decide, like, okay, he ran into some issues. Do we want to take him? And what the Jazz are kind of going through right now. Then, of course, we have an NBA Finals matchup between the Spurs and the Knicks. Before we break, I want to tell you about my friends at IFA Country Stores. The crack of the bat, the pop of the ball. Baseball season is in full bloom, and it's time for your home to get in the game. Treat your lawn this month with IFA Spring and Summer Lawn Food. It's blended locally and formulated especially for Utah soils. It grows a healthy, lush, and thick, dark green, weed-free lawn. Just another one of our 4 easy steps. Find out more online at ifa.coop or at a local Utah store today. More with Smitty coming up next on ESPN 700. We are roughly 3 weeks-ish away from the NBA draft, where the Utah Jazz find themselves with the number 2 overall pick in the draft. And as a result of some really good reporting by our friend Sarah Todd from the Deseret News, a little more insight on where we're at with Darren Peterson. A lot of people believe the Jazz will exit the draft process with Darren Peterson should Washington decide to go A.J. Dibonsa. Richard Smith is live in studio. So, Smitty, when it comes to what you have to do as a guy that was in the front office for 40 years to analyze a player, we'll use Darren as the example because of all the noise around his health stuff at Kansas. Darren and his camp went with the creatine story, and several of his own statements were debunked by doctors. So, look, I'm not a medical professional. I take creatine. I've never cramped before. Darren apparently had an adverse reaction to it. But from a team standpoint, information like this, what do you do with it when you're analyzing what you need to do with a pick like number 2, which, of course, is such a big opportunity?
Yeah, well, everybody's doing all their homework, Spence. They have those guys in the NBA draft combine that was a couple weeks ago in Chicago. All the doctors, team doctors are there. The NBA has their own doctors there. They put all these guys through a series of tests and measurements and all this stuff, and then they put together a combined report on every guy in the that goes through that draft process. And we used to have a meeting about a week before the draft, and the doctors that gave our team doctors time to look over all the information on every guy. So they would look over x-rays, they would look over blood testing, they would look over all the stuff that they did, the measurables on the physicals that those players went through at the draft combine. They'd read through everything, they'd put together their own notes, and then we would sit together around the conference table, and it was always a long meeting, a long evening, because we would start with the A's. Okay, who's the first guy? John Adams, he's the first guy, okay? He reported when he was a freshman that he had a hangnail, but they put some salve on it and they've sealed. Everything is on there. And then your team doctors weigh in. And we would always have it graded like a green, a yellow, or a red. Meaning a green was the guy's fine, don't worry about him, he's good to go. You do what you want basketball-wise. A yellow was we have a few questions. There's some things that you might want to be aware of, but nothing that keeps him out of us looking at him seriously. And then your red, which means he has some kind of a condition or a situation that our team doctors would look at and say, I would strongly recommend you not consider drafting him because of reasons A, B, and C. And one of the great ones that comes to mind, from not that recently, but Brandon Roy, who we all know was a very good player, and came into the NBA and had an issue. And our doctors came in and said they had it right on the button. They said, we'd tell you, a great player. Yeah, he's okay. He's got this knee issue. In the NBA, for the number of games he's going to play and the minutes he's going to play, he's going to last 5 years. He's going to have 5 good years. And then after that, it's going to start breaking down. And then how long he lasts after that just depends on, some other circumstances we can't predict.
Wow.
And Brandon Roy.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so Brandon Roy. Now, on the flip side, we have the kid, I'm going to forget his name now, the kid from Pitt was drafted in the second round by San Antonio.
DeJuan Blair.
There we go. DeJuan Blair. Okay. 10 points for Spence Checketts. So DeJuan Blair comes in the draft. Everybody likes him. He's a top 15, maybe top 10 talent, depending on your evaluation. Bulldog, gets in there, tough guy, can make shots, rebound in traffic, all this stuff. We want that kind of guy on our team. Our team doctors come in and they say, hey, DeJuan Blair, I don't know what to tell you about him, but he has he has both his ACLs are
gone, right?
Gone,
yeah.
Are gone. And we said, what does that mean? And they said, well, both his ACLs are gone. Okay. And so we consider him. We don't consider him. They go, well, I'm just telling you, but in high school, we got all his records. In high school, he didn't miss a game. His coaches said he didn't miss a practice. He goes to Pitt, plays 3 years, doesn't miss a game, doesn't miss a practice. doesn't seem to have any problem with no ACLs. And they go, well, that's up to you guys, but but we could never.
Here's the information.
The direct information, the direct thing about from a medical perspective. So what does that mean? What does that mean anyway? So that scared a lot of people. That's why Dwan Blair went. I think it was in the mid-30s to San Antonio.
Sounds right.
Everybody would have taken him in the top, the top 15, maybe even some in the top 10 if they didn't have that. But a lot of the teams are like, yeah, I don't know what that means or whatever. And what does it mean? Dwan Blair goes to San Antonio, and I think he played like 5 or 6 years straight without missing a game before he missed the game because he had the flu. I mean, it was like, so these things are always, they're so, the medical guys who are going to give you all the information. The basketball people have to make a determination what that means to them. And then, of course, you get your general manager or your team president, of course, with the owner to make a final decision on, A or B. We take a chance on this guy or not. There was a few guys over in Europe over the years who were big, long guys who didn't have medicals, who maybe there was, some kind of an issue with their growth plates, but we don't know. Do you take a chance on them? Do you not? All those kind of things come into play, Spence, because especially for the Jazz now when they've got at the moment, the number 2 pick, that's a big money decision. And it's a big, potentially franchise-changing decision depending on how the guy works out. So you got to make sure you have all your ducks lined up and you have all that information and you're comfortable with the information you have and the input from your medical staff, that everybody feels comfortable that making this decision makes sense for us at this time.
So when it comes to the Peterson stuff specifically, I don't know how much you've dug in on this stuff, Smitty, but there are a lot of people that are around basketball that cover the draft and talk about the draft that do believe that if Washington goes AJ, the Jazz simply should draft Darren Peterson. What's kind of your feel or vibe around this entire story? And if you were kind of in those rooms, would you have your alarm bells going off based off of what's happened?
Yeah, well, first of all, a year ago now, Spence, when they were coming out of high school, getting ready to go to college last year, Darren Peterson was considered a tier above everybody else in terms of his talent, his raw skill level, his ability to handle the ball, to shoot the ball with consistency from range, to put it on the floor, to create. If you're talking about a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you're talking about a De'Aaron Fox, you're talking about a Dylan Harper, you're talking about any of these guys who are currently playing, still in the NBA playoffs. The NBA now is driven by tall guards who can handle, can shoot, and can play make. And Darren Peterson checks all those boxes when he was at the high school level. His explosiveness, his timing, his touch on passes, his ability to get into seams, to attack the rim, find guys, make open shots, all those things. And so the uneven year he had at Kansas, okay, how do you weigh that? That's for those guys in the room with the medical guys to figure out if this creatine thing is a real story. I don't know if it is or not, but I certainly know that the kid's talent and his ability is such that that's the kind of guy any team wants as the head of the snake. If you want to be a competitive team for a long time, you need a guy like that to be running your show. And so, to me, if that stuff checks out, and I don't know how it will, but the Jazz will have their people, and they'll have a lot of people looking into all that and deciphering that. But at the end of the day, if that stuff checks out to me, I just, even though it sounds simplistic and it sounds, like one of these things where you can tell people, hey, sometimes you just overthink things and try and find a reason not to do something, okay? I've been watching these guys. I've been studying these guys. I know what their capability is. I know what I think is their ceiling, okay? The Bansa, all right? The Peterson, okay? Cam Boozer, I love him as well, okay? I'll take any of those guys. I don't care. Whoever it is, you tell me I'm taking second, okay, I'll choose between one of those guys. I'm not going to overthink it and try and figure out, talk myself out of it. those guys have enough promise as prospects to really influence playing and affect winning night in and night out at the NBA level. Are they going to do that? Only time will tell. But at the moment, they are all guys who are really on that top tier that I don't think you can go wrong with whoever ends up falling in your lap, and you just take the guy you like. We've said this before, Spence, as a simple comparison. Everybody likes ice cream. Some people like vanilla. Some people like chocolate, okay? Some people are going to like Peterson. Some people are going to like Boozer, okay? My guy we talked about earlier, Devin Tovey, he's a golfer. He's a big basketball fan. He's texting me the other day, hey, I think Boozer's the best guy. The Jazz should be taking Boozer. And I said, Dev, you should probably be own an NBA team. And he said, yeah, I probably should.
Keep winning golf tournaments, kid. You'll get there.
But that's the thing. People are going to see things differently. They're going to interpret it differently. But those guys where the Jazz are sitting, to me, they really don't need to overthink it. They just need to be confident that whoever we end up with is a guy we believe is going to be able to help us significantly going forward.
Yeah, I mean, where I've landed, Smitty, unless you find something during your process that really, really causes your antennas to go up, I think you take whoever Washington doesn't out of AJ and Darren. I mean, that's where I've landed.
I mean, and I don't think you have to get into, well, how can we move up? How we get, this old DeBanza local thing. He wants to be here. His parents live, to me, that's really, in my opinion, if I was in the room, and over the years we would have these kind of discussions. That stuff gets put to the side. Those are non-factors, and we went through this last year with the Ace Bailey kid who was never proven that he said it or somebody in his camp said it, but all the rumors were that, oh yeah, he doesn't want to go somewhere, and the somewhere is Utah. And where does he end up in Utah? He ends up playing well for the Jazz this year. Looks like he's assimilated into it. Those things, they flush themselves out, and guys get situated and they get used to their teammates and coaches and all that stuff. It really goes by the wayside fairly quickly. So you got to take that and put it aside, and you just got to concentrate on the stuff that makes sense in terms of evaluation and what you think is can help your team to improve and get better.
What if they have done their analysis, and regardless of AJ being local or not, they just think he's head and shoulders above everybody else now?
Yeah.
You see all these crazy trade ideas. The idea of trading number 2 and Ace Bailey to move up to number 1, like I'd hang up the phone if Washington called and offered me that. But it does feel like maybe number 2 this year and maybe a future first, which is what Danny traded, the first round, the number 1 overall pick to Philly for back in the day. That feels doable. I mean, if they want AJ and Washington says we're taking him, so if you want him, you better you better make us the offer. I mean, what about that process?
Well, and that whole process, Spence, could also play out because they'll have all that stuff on boards. They'll have it all. They'll have all different kinds of machinations of it. They'll have how it could potentially impact your team, not just roster-wise, but also financially, what that's going to mean. The guys are going to, if the Jazz do that evaluation and they think, we just think this guy is the guy, okay? He's better than the other guys, and we need him. How do we get to him? We see Spence, of course, what's playing out in front of us right now with a guy like Wembanyama, ends up in San Antonio. Obviously he was kind of a no-brainer pick for them in that draft 3 years ago. But when you get a guy, if you believe in he can be transformational and he can really add that level of talent and skill to your group. If you come to that conclusion, evaluation, then it doesn't matter what you have to pay for him. If that's what you think, you need three first-round picks. You need Ace Bailey. Who else you need? You want Kante Georgia, whatever. We just need that guy because in the NBA, you need 2 guys to be really competitive, but you need 3 real guys to really, really be one of those top echelon teams that has a real chance year in and year out. And so if you think that guy, whoever that guy would be, if it's the Bansa in this example, and you think he can be one of those guys, then it doesn't matter what you have to pay for him because you're convinced that that's going to work out because we can only play 5 guys at once on the floor in a competitive game. So if he's that much of a difference maker in our eyes, then we can sit here and negotiate all day how much we're willing to pay for that.
Do you think any of these players are on, because the line you keep hearing is there are multiple really good players in this draft, but there isn't like a Wembanyama or a Cooper Flagg. Right. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good. I like the first 8, 9, 10 players.
Yeah.
I think they're all going to be impactful players at the NBA level. I think they all have a chance depending on the teams they get with and who their teammates are, how they're coached, all those kinds of things. But their development, they all are guys who bring something unique to the table, whether it's something like the Wagler kid from Illinois, who's a big guard, who's really a great, terrific playmaker, sees the floor, can really, pick out guys, can really get in a seam and dish it to shooters. You have to have shooters then to be able to play with him. You have somebody like the Acuff kid from Arkansas, who is really a dynamic ball in hand guy who can really get you points anywhere, not only driving and getting to the rim, but also go over the top because he's a very good shooter. There's questions about his defense at the college level. I'm not that worried about that. I think he's got the athleticism to be able to do that, and I think his pride would come through when he gets on a competitive NBA floor every night in that regard. But he's a guy who could be one of those guys who could really help a team as a ball handling guard who can really create for you and make things tough for you, like Brunson's doing, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does, like De'Aaron Fox does, Dylan Harper. All these guys, they're all big. Brunson's smaller, obviously, but a unique talent. But those are the kind of guys you're looking at and trying to decipher if these guys are all guys that you're comfortable with if it comes to having to choose among them.
So if we operate off your premise that you need 2 guys, okay, we'll use the Smitty term guys, real guys
yeah,
to compete year in and year out, but you need 3 to be upper echelon.
I think, yeah.
How many guys do the Jazz have? Heading into next year, how many real guys do the Jazz have?
They have Jaren Jackson is a real guy. Lauri Markkanen is a real guy. Okay, so we got 2. Okay, Walker Kessler, to me, is a good starting center, a good help, a kind of guy you need in your lineup because he's big. He can defend at the rim. He can rebound. He doesn't need the ball to be effective, so you don't have to worry about him complaining that he's not getting enough shots or the offense not running through him or whatever. So you get a good cog, a good piece in somebody like him. To me, Keontae George, his place in the NBA is going to be eventually, my opinion, will be as a scoring guard off the bench. Your sixth man who comes off to the old people listening, a Vinnie Johnson microwave type guy or a Jamal Crawford or a Lou Williams, one of those kind of guys who can come in that second unit and provide a spark and get you a quick 12 points early in the second quarter, that kind of thing. I think that's his niche and his role. So that's what I think he plays. Ace Bailey, I don't know. Yet I didn't really see enough of him, again, in meaningful games, Spence. This is also part of the tough evaluation process with the Jazz the last couple of years. None of these guys played in games that really meant anything, and so they didn't have that pressure, which is always a different thing, night in and night out, to try and win a game down the last 5 minutes when it's meaningful. And so that becomes a different game for guys. So Ace Bailey, I think, it looks like he has a nice game, a nice temperament. I think he's going to be a nice player. He doesn't seem to be a real explosive kind of guy, at least hasn't shown that from the wing, like just taking it and jumping over 2 guys and over the top of the backboard and that kind of thing. I think he could probably do that sometime, but that wasn't in his regular repertoire. So those guys to me are all guys who are like secondary pieces to what you're trying to do. If you got Markkanen, you got Jackson, and you can add now a third guy. If that guy comes in and does like we're seeing with Dylan Harper, who was the second pick last year, comes in and right away he's making meaningful impact on meaningful games right away, right? So if you get a guy like that, if that's a Darren Peterson, especially at that position, and you got that shored up, now you've got Jaren Jackson who's helping you. Now you've got Markkanen who can shoot. Now you've got those bigs, and now you got the other piece with Kessler if they get him to come back. And all of a sudden, that to me is a very interesting team. Those things got to fit together. They got to work together, all that kind of stuff. But that would make it very interesting.
So the reports are the Walker-Kessler contract is going to be around $30 million per. That's what people are talking about. Yeah. When you look at centers who are paid $30 million-ish per year, you're talking about Chet Holmgren, Alfred Şengün, and Rudy. Bam is 37 this year, but it goes up to 49 next year. Is Walker in that group? You know, the Şengün, Gobert, Chet Holmgren talent type pool?
Yeah, well, this is the way I would pose it to you, Spence. He's in that group if you believe that having him in the middle with your group really solidifies your ability to compete night in and night out and to be able to win games. Paying him $30 million, that doesn't equate to him having to get 22 and 12 every night.
Right.
That doesn't, a lot of people miscast that and think, you got to be one of those guys. Şengün's a different player than Rudy. Rudy's a different player than Adebayo. Adebayo's a different player. Okay. Can Kessler fit in that part that you need defensively, rebounding, protecting the rim to fit with the other pieces when you're putting that puzzle together? Is it worth it to pay him that, to know that he's anchoring that when you're putting these other parts of it together? If you believe that, then he is worth it, because then you believe he's going to be an integral part of helping us to be competitive and have a chance to win night in and night out. That's what it's all about, is trying to move those chess pieces around the board so that they all fit comfortably and they give you that kind of a chance all the time.
All right, before I set you loose, not many people thought San Antonio was going to be able to get by OKC. Now, as I talked about to start the show, with the way Chet just kind of wilted in that series, I think it's maybe easy to say Jalen Williams might be their second most or second best player. A.J. Mitchell came on late in the year and had some good playoff games as well. So, in fairness, OKC was not able to stay healthy. As you always point out, that's one of the massive things you got to have if you're going to win the thing. And San Antonio was able to get Dylan Harper back and able to get De'Aaron Fox back. But Victor Wembanyama, at the age of 22, leads his Spurs in Oklahoma City in their building and wins Game 7 of a Western Conference Finals. It felt important. It felt like a seismic night for pro basketball. So what are your thoughts on what San Antonio has already accomplished, and what do you make of this NBA Finals matchup?
Well, the matchup, I think, is going to be great. First of all, as you know, Spence, you and I have gone around this many times. I don't predict what's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to happen in these games. One thing I do know, even though everybody seems to be picking San Antonio or think that they have an edge, they've got home court advantage, whatever. I think a lot of that is recency bias, recency reporting. That's who everybody's been watching, because the Knicks haven't played in over a week. Why? Because they destroyed everybody in the 11 previous playoff games they played, home and road. And they were not winning games, Spence. They were destroying the games, okay?
Best net rating over an 11-game span in the history of the league.
Yeah, and so they're on some kind of heater. And these are the things that you hope for, Spence. You always hear players and coaches talk all year in December and January. Well, we're trying to find our footing. We're trying to get in the flow. We're trying to get it so when we get to the playoffs, we're kind of working our way up to that. Which is always a bunch of baloney. Everybody's always trying to win every night they go out, except some teams who don't want to win every night. Okay, so the teams.
Oh, tanking's fixed. I guess you didn't hear while you were in Paris.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but these guys, the Knicks, have been destroying teams, okay, in this heater. Now, can it continue because they've had over a week off? Will they be able to keep doing that to San Antonio? Wembanyama provides a different perspective because he's so unique, and not just his length and his skill ability, but his mindset and his willingness to do what it takes, especially on the defensive end, to help his teammates. That's a big deal. Is he going to always be shadowing Jalen Brunson at 6'1", maybe 6'2"?
No way.
Not.
No chance he's 6'2".
And is Wembanyama going to be stretching over him like a shadow all the time? So it's going to be hard to get shots off. So if that's the case, then that's going to be difficult for the Knicks. But at the same time, the Knicks, they've been playing playoff teams. They've been playing good teams. Atlanta had beaten them a couple times early in that series, and then they went to Philly, and then they went to Detroit, and they destroyed them.
Cleveland.
Cleveland. I'm sorry. And so they just have been whitewashing those teams. They've been on this heater. Can they continue it? Obviously, we'll find out. But this is historic that they've been on, and I know one thing: it's going to be hard for me watching games over the next 2 weeks, especially the games at Madison Square Garden, because I'm so over all the New York hype and all the celebrity row and all the guys who were showing up now and all the guys who were dancing around in the streets and all the New York stuff, and this is unbelievable. And they already had the victory parade after they beat Cleveland. They had millions of people out there. I'm going, did anybody tell them that the playoffs aren't over? Like they said, what
Porter,
is going on?
Are you listening to this? Are you listening to the hate? I told you, Smitty's a hater.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
He's
I can
proven it
tell.
now. Yeah.
No, that's, and your boy Stephen A. We got to listen to him every day, and then we got. Hey, this is one thing I'm going to pose to you, Spence. How about this? Let's set an over/under, okay, for the series. An over/under on how many times Victor Wembanyama gives a stare down, Reggie Miller style, to your boy Spike Lee during the series. Like something happens, big block, big flush, big three, something. Wemby turns and just stares down your guy like, yeah, yo, I'm here. You got me, that kind of thing.
I don't think he does. I don't think he will.
Oh, come on.
I think he's just going to go about his business. That's what I love about this kid.
Because Spike is going to goad him into it, but Wemby's going to give it back to him in a positive way. Yeah, he's not going to do anything outrageous. But you watch, sometime early on, Spike Lee's going to be yelling something, especially if they're at the Garden, and Wembanyama's going to do something, and he's just going to look over, and he's just going to look at him. He's just going to give him a stare for a couple of seconds. And Spike Lee's going to go, you looking at me? Are you looking at me? Like this New York thing, right? He's going to stand up and start pumping his fist or something. And Wembanyama's just going to look at him like Reggie Miller, just backing up and just stare. You watch, Spence. It's going to happen numerous times, I believe, during the course of the series, because Wembanyama is that kind of guy. He likes to try and get into all of that, not in a bad way, like in a subtle way, like I just want you to know I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere.
I want to see those two stand next to each other. So Spike is like 5'2". By the way, why do you listen to Stephen A. Smith?
I don't. No. Look.
Then don't.
Look, I can't. No, I don't listen to him. Sometimes I turn the TV on. Sometimes I click on the internet or something. There's some rant about him. He's got all the answers with everything, and whatever. And the Knicks were dead. After the 2-1 fall behind in Atlanta, they're dead. They stink. They this and thing. And now they're the greatest thing since
Turn the TV off.
Yeah,
dude.
well, you got
Change the channel.
you got that right.
I live in a Stephen A. Smith free zone. All right, Scary Movie is coming to theaters on June the 5th, and ESPN 700 wants to send you first. Text MOVIE right now to 33986 for your chance to score 4 tickets to Scary Movie. We will catch a break, and our guy Lee Ellis will join us coming up next. Then it's Roxy Bernstein, Busy Monday Show. Keep it here on ESPN 700. As much as I love the NBA Finals, and I'm absolutely juiced about this matchup, I always get sad as we kind of inch closer and closer to the end. First couple rounds, so fun to have all these games every night, but no NBA hoops tonight or tomorrow. Game one of the NBA Finals will be on Wednesday between the Spurs and the Knicks. It can be heard on this radio station. Let's talk more ball. Pumped to see Lee Ellis on the rundown today, and he joins us now on a Monday. Lee, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Fine, thanks, Spence. Thanks very much for having me.
No, I appreciate the time. So let's just start there. What do you make of this NBA Finals matchup? A lot of people pumped. And 22 years old, Wemby is not coming. He is here, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And if you're the NBA, this is pretty much a dream matchup outside of maybe Lakers-Knicks, because you've got the Knicks obviously in the finals here, one of the most glamorous teams, and then you've got the young, probably the face of the NBA for the next decade or further, in his first finals, pretty much ahead of schedule. I think a lot of people thought the Spurs were going to be better than they were last year. We really wanted to see Fox and Wembanyama together to see how those two would gel, but I don't think many people thought they were going to be in this position already. So now it's just a matter of how well they handle it, because they come in, as far as the betting goes, as the favorite. However, it's very unusual that we see a young team go from not making the playoffs to automatically into the finals and favorite. It just doesn't happen in the NBA. Usually it's a process of building up over, 3 or 4 years, which is what the Knicks have done to get here. They've been in the conference finals last year where they lost to the Pacers. They were upset by the Pacers. The year before, they lost to the Pacers again in a Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. They had a few injuries and things like that, but more to the point that they've sort of been building up to this moment, whereas the Spurs have kind of leapfrogged over everybody in the West. Teams like maybe the Rockets with Kevin Durant and the Nuggets, who we've seen win the championship a couple of years ago. And then, of course, they knock off the defending champs just the other night. So it's fascinating. I think it's really intriguing. And for me, this is what the NBA is where it's at its best, where you've got new teams in the finals. Both fan bases are really going to feel they're a chance to win this. And that's something we didn't see if you go back to those sort of Cavs-Warriors battles. I mean, they were great. Of course, the Cavs had the big one 10 years ago. But other than that, it felt like the Warriors were always the favorite. Now, every season, we're getting new teams in the finals and new teams really challenging. And I just think this is something that's really, really good for the NBA.
You can give us some good perspective on this. We were talking about this earlier. And, of course, in the American basketball ecosystem, in the modern day, all of the best players start playing with and against each other when they're 12, 13, 14 because of the AAU circuit. That's not how it used to be. What that has bred is friendships and relationships of a lot of these players that start when they're young, go throughout high school, go throughout AAU and college, and continue in the NBA. And one of the things I love about Wembanyama is he has what Mike had. He has what Kobe had. He has the desire to go in and compete, and he wants to take your will every single night. How much of that do you think is as a result of him not growing up in this system with most of his peers?
Yeah, well, probably a pretty big one, because I think in Europe as well, you mentioned that a lot of these guys, they play together when they're young, but they're also taught more about the team concept rather than the sort of individualistic style, which I sort of relate more to, the United States way, because you've always got like a franchise tag. It's his team. It's this guy's the number one player on the team. Whereas in Europe, it's really more about the fundamentals, and the focus is on, like, it's great if you can score and you can shoot, you can dunk, all that is great, but you better be able to pass that ball. You better learn to cut. You better learn to defend as well, because all those things are just as important. And if you look at Serbia, for example, with Nikola Jokic and Bogdan Bogdanovic and Luka Doncic, who's obviously Slovenian, not Serbian, but from that same area, these guys, when they were playing basketball as a kid, like, they were taught a lot of 3-on-3 stuff. And 3-on-3 is actually really good to learn the fundamentals, because you're involved in almost every possession on the court, whether it's on offense or defense. Because if you're sloppy on defense, you're going to get burned by your teammate. And if on offense, you have to be able to cut, you have to be able to dribble, you have to be able to pass. And if you look at Serbia, they're already 6-time 3-on-3 world champions. And that's kind of where that's an Olympic sport now. So that's really, really growing. And I think that's really important because it teaches guys that even if you are super talented, you can't just survive on being a good shooter. You have to have a more rounded game. And I think we're starting to see that because Wemby, I mean, that ball handling is just incredible. You know, can you imagine back in the day if Shaq had that sort of handle and he could hit those threes? I mean, he'd be just the most dominant player we've ever seen. But right now, Wemby's a little bit of Shaq there with his dominance, a little bit of power, but he's also got that almost, I won't say Steph Curry range, but he's getting there, and maybe he will develop that the further he goes through his career. So I think it's great. But again, with Wemby, and you see it on this team, he's very humble and he's very mature beyond his years. He doesn't want all the credit, and he knows that the Spurs are so much more than just him as well. It's not like where you can just dump the ball in, and if he goes for 40 and 20 like he did in that first game against the Thunder, they're going to win. You know, Stephon Castle's been incredible. Devin Vassell's been fantastic. Keldon Johnson was Sixth Man of the Year. So they are so much more than Wemby, but of course Wemby takes so much gravity with everything he does. And, again, I think a lot of that is how he learned to play the entire game, not just the focus was on him as a kid in growing up in France.
One of the interesting narratives, because, of course, as you know, we had Rudy Gobert here for 9 years, and he was beloved in Utah, and it seemed like he was hated everywhere else, and I never fully understood why. And I still feel like there's this permeating, I don't know, disrespect that's constantly sent Rudy's way. And it really irritates me, quite frankly, because he really is such a sweet guy. He did a lot of good things for this community. And you heard a lot of people say, well, he's French. And so, you know, maybe people don't respect. Well, so is Wembanyama. Wembanyama has what appears to me, Lee, the unanimous support and respect from his peers in a way that Rudy has never had and will never have. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, sometimes people just don't like a guy, and I think that's the thing is with Rudy, because everyone would love him on their team, because he's a very impactful player on both ends of the floor. Of course, he's had his moments where he hasn't been as good, and then there's been other moments where he's been very, very dominant. But I know with Quinn Snyder being in here in Atlanta, he would love to have someone like Rudy on his team right now, because that's one of the areas the Hawks are struggling. They don't have they don't have a rim protector, and they don't have that guy who's a fierce competitor like Rudy has been. So sometimes it might be just his personality, you know, like Rudy is a bit gruff maybe, but also it's kind of easy to pick on him as well. And you know what it's like as well on social media. Once you get a narrative, once you get sort of assigned something, whether you're soft or you're unfriendly or people just don't like you, it's very hard to shake that tag. Just impossible. And I agree with you. I mean, I haven't spoken to Rudy many times in my career, but I have spoken to him a few times. He's always been incredibly respectful. He's been very polite and very sincere. And those sorts of qualities don't always translate when you're on the basketball court, when you're a competitor. So it's unfortunate because, you know, all of us, for whatever reason, you know, we have some parts of our personality that some people like and some people don't. But when you're in the sporting world, sometimes people get hold of something and just run with that forever, and that's just the way it goes, whether it's true or not. So I agree. I think Rudy is a fantastic guy. I think he's a very underrated competitor. I think he's got the accolades as far as the defensive player of the year that he's proven. He's an incredibly impactful player. Tim Connolly gave up a ton to get him there in Minnesota, and he's been a very, very good player. But he's just one of those guys who hasn't been loved, and he probably never really will be embraced by the broader NBA community.
Since we kind of referenced the Jazz there a little bit, we are in Salt Lake City, Lee, so we have a lot of Jazz fan listeners. I haven't spoken to you since a couple of things have happened, namely the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, and then they finally get the lottery luck that they've never had before, and they jump up to number 2, and you're aware of all the narratives. It's an interesting dynamic here because it really is a generational opportunity for the Jazz to reshape their organization. Cameron Boozer's father, Carlos Boozer, works for the Utah Jazz, and A.J. DiBonsa played his college basketball at Brigham Young, and he played his last year of high school basketball here in Utah, and his family lives here as well. And, of course, there's the Darren Peterson stuff. So your thoughts on what you think the Jazz are going to do at number 2, and then your big picture thoughts on what you think the Jazz could be next year.
Yeah, I sort of think they're going to lean to Boozer myself. Now, don't take that with any sort of grain of salt that I have any inside information. I don't, but it just seems to me that with Carlos there, you know, they do get an advantage. I mean, look what happened with the Knicks when Rick Brunson went there. You know, it was like, well, Jalen, no, you know, he's not going to go there, and he ends up going there. So, you know, Carlos was a fantastic player for the Jazz, an all-star a couple of times there. He was a really, really good player. So you have that advantage. Now, do you have someone who maybe feel a little more comfortable settling in as well to the NBA with his dad and his family around him? That should help, Cam Boozer. And so with the Banster and Peterson, you can honestly, it's a toss-up for those two, who you want to choose out of them. Now, let's say the Jazz say, okay, we really want Peterson, but if he's not on the board, then we go with Boozer. Well, if Peterson is on the board, let's say DeBanster goes number one, maybe then they do go ahead and grab him. But that sort of stuff, that's really the intel that only someone on the super inside would know exactly what the Jazz is thinking. But I think when you weigh up everything, there's some history there with the Boozer family. You have Carlos on the side there. I think it might be something that just tempts them, Austin Ainge and the crew there, to sort of say, well, why don't we go with this guy? He's a great player as well. He's proven to be a very good player. He's been in that top sort of 3 to 5 pretty much all season. So it figures that it's not a reach to grab him at 2 if he's still on the board there, or if their preferred guard is not on the board. So look, and to add further to your question there about how the Jazz are looking next season and beyond, I think Jaren Jackson was a fantastic pickup for them. I think he's a great player. He's really developed and grown there in Memphis, and it was time for him to leave there. That Memphis team feels like it was about to break up. I don't think Ja Morant's going to be there next season. I don't think he's going to Utah, but it feels like that Grizzlies team is looking to sort of start again. And for the fact that the Jazz got Jaren Jackson, who's a Defensive Player of the Year winner in the past, and really a developing and growing player, I think that's great. He's at the stage of his career where he's looking to win. The Jazz are probably not obviously contenders next season, but certainly you would start to see the building blocks in place, and with a high draft pick, that things are going to look on the up there. Because I've said for a long time, I always think that the Utah Jazz home court advantage is one of the most significant in the NBA. Obviously, the last couple of seasons it hasn't been there, but once they start winning again, of the 41 home games, it's almost like you can lock in 30 to 35 of those for wins, because it's just so hard. And again, I spoke to Quinn Snyder. I speak to him a lot. I cover the Hawks here. And I often talk to him about that. I say, Utah is one of those teams that just felt like there was always a tough place to win for the opponents. And he said, the crowd, the atmosphere, it means so much to the people of Utah when the Jazz are playing well. So that they're not in for a long rebuild here. They want to get back to winning, and they want to get back to competing. And I think you're going to start to see, a pretty significant improvement, certainly next season and then beyond.
So, and by the way, next time you talk to Quinn, mention you were on my show. That's my guy. While he was here, I was with the Jazz, so that's my guy. But 22 wins this year for the Jazz. A lot of people around here, after they got the number 2 pick, started to get a little loose with some expectations. If I said to you 45 wins and a play-in spot next year for the Jazz, what's your reaction to that?
That's a big jump. It's a big jump. You're doubling your win total. Off the top of my head, you would have to look at sort of which teams are dropping off next season to make room there for them to come in, because I think the Warriors obviously are in that same sort of area, but with Steve Kerr coming back, that makes me believe they're going to make some sort of a big splash, because they obviously still believe they can compete. And then the Clippers obviously, the Clippers are always in that same sort of spot. So I don't think they can get to 45 wins. I think if they can break 500, that would be a significant improvement, and that might be enough to get them in the play-in. It's sort of always, it's tough to see where that number 10 spot is, but I wouldn't think with a rookie that they could make that much of an improvement in one season. However, of course, maybe Larry Markkinen gets traded as well, and they get something back in return for him. I like Larry, by the way. I think he's a great player. I hope they don't trade him, but maybe that's what they also do, is they look to add another vet to coming in and help them winning straight away. So I would say today that's a bit of a stretch for me to get to 45, but I certainly expect them to be more competitive in that play-in race for a significant chunk of the season. And then again, if things break right for them, maybe they can. But again, it's tough to see a team make that big a jump without a franchise-altering player in the draft. And I don't think Boozer or DeBanster or Peterson is one of those guys. You're talking like, of course, a Wembanyama or even a Cooper Flagg or someone like that. But I don't think that sort of quality of player is available in this draft.
So if San Antonio, and we'll let you go after just a couple of more finals thoughts, Lee, I always appreciate your time. If San Antonio is able to get this thing done, they're starting to become this conversation permeating through NBA people that feels a little bit like the conversation we were having with the Warriors when it was Steph and Clay and Durant, where it was like, is it even worth it to try? Because they're just going to win the thing every year. If San Antonio gets this done, and look, you always have to bring health into the equation, and Oklahoma City was without two really good players, not just Jalen Williams, but A.J. Mitchell was out as well. What sort of message does that send to the rest of the NBA about what they could potentially do? This kid is 22. I mean, you referenced ahead of schedule. Like it's wild to consider the possibilities of what this could mean if San Antonio actually breaks through and wins the NBA Finals. What message does that send, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, it really is quite daunting because, again, it's not just Wemby. They've got Castle, who's in his second season, Keldon Johnson, who's a vet by their standards, a six-man coming off the bench, Devin Vassell, another one who's been there for a long time, and then Dylan Harper, the rookie, who was incredible too, during this season and this series. And so I think a lot of it comes back as well to the leadership of Wembanyama in the sense that he very much wants to deflect that he gets all the credit. You know, he's very complimentary of his players, of the coaching staff. And that kind of reminds me of Tim Duncan. You know, Tim Duncan never wanted all the glory. He never wanted all the money and all the shots. He just wanted to win. And I think that really set the tone because you always had Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili there as well. But it was always those complimentary players who could come in and fill a role and accept that role. And that's why the Spurs were just so good for basically 20 years. They were either in contention or winning the championship. And I think Wembanyama's got that same mentality. I just don't see him being there saying, okay, now that I've won, you know, a championship, I want to be scoring all the points next year. I want all the attention and all the adulation. I think he's going to keep on deflecting and including everyone on that team. And so that's why it's set up so well. The Spurs just know how to handle this situation. Of course, there's going to be a point where Wembanyama signs his max contract, and then, you know, the other guys are going to want to get paid as well. So Pat Riley talked about that, of course, you know, the disease of more, that once you win a championship, guys want more money and they want more shots. But it just feels with San Antonio, that's not as much of a concern as it might be and has been with other teams in the past. But having said all that as well, when the Milwaukee Bucks won it, like 5 years ago now, I thought they were set up for a long run. They've won one playoff series since. Same with the Denver Nuggets. You know, when they won it a couple of years ago, I thought, man, they're really set up. They're young. You know, Jokic is the star, but Murray and Porter, you know, those guys are young and still hungry, and they haven't really panned out. So it's not a guarantee, but it certainly feels more likely that this is a sustainable success run that the Spurs are on than any of the other teams we've seen in the past.
All right, before I set you loose, I am going back to New York for Game 4 of the Garden. Very excited for that. Do my New York Knicks have a puncher's chance in this series, Lee?
Oh, I absolutely do think so, too. I picked the Knicks to win it in 6. I think, despite everything we've said here, I think experience is more important than a team that hasn't really been there before. I know Harrison Barnes is on that team, but I think the Knicks have been building towards this. And, you know, there's always the rust versus rest debate. I think when you're a young team, you don't need as much rest. The Knicks took care of business incredibly convincingly in those first 3 rounds, and they got their good rest. They're ready to go. And we all associate the Knicks with a somewhat dysfunctional franchise over the last 25 years, and for good reason. You know, GM's fired, coaches fired, players in and out. But that's not this team. And I can't believe I'm saying this. James Dolan deserves credit because he installed Leon Rose, and he has seemingly kept out of his way and allowed Leon Rose to build that team. And now it is a very, very good team. So I picked the Knicks to win it in 6. I think this is their time, and it feels crazy to say that the Knicks are a competent, organized team right now, but that's what they've shown me. I was up close. I saw them against the Pacers last season. That first loss at home, that really derailed them for the rest of that series. And that's why I actually think it's a good thing that the Knicks start on the road in this series, because the Spurs have got to win that first game, certainly one of the first 2. But if the Knicks can pinch one, then they get a chance to maybe close this out at home in Game 6. And I think that's where the experience is going to come into play. So I've got Knicks in 6. Spence, I'm with you on this one. I think your Knicks are going to do it.
I love hearing that, Lee. You're the first person I've heard predict that, so I do appreciate it. Hey, thanks so much for the time. Tell our listeners where they can go get your work.
Yeah, just follow me on all the socials at just at Lee Ellis, LEIGHELLIS. And thanks again for having me, Spence. Always appreciate it.
Safe travels. Keep up the great work, and never forget you are a basketball podcast OG. So I hope everyone remembers that, Lee. I certainly do.
Thanks, Spence. I appreciate it, man.
All right, the great Lee Ellis. Yeah, he and his buddies started the No Dunks podcast on NBA TV before like anybody was podcasting. At Lee Ellis is where you find him on social media. Really good dude. Appreciate his time. We'll catch a break. We're going to switch gears and talk a little hockey and maybe sneak in a little college football with our old buddy Roxy Bernstein coming up next right here on ESPN 700. The Smashing Pumpkins are taking over the Delta Center on October the 29th. Tune into the Sean O'Connell Show this week for your chance to score a pair of tickets. But it is Counting Crows that you're hearing, and that means it's Roxy Bernstein time on a Monday afternoon. Roxy, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Spence. What's going on?
Any love for the county or any love for the Smashing Pumpkins?
There's a story I will tell you off the air. How's that?
You have wait. Hold on a second.
This is not for air. I cannot put this one out there.
You have a Smashing Pumpkins story? How do you know all these famous people?
It's like this one's like a 6 degrees of. A friend of mine had a run-in with Smashing Pumpkins. And,
okay.
So I will leave it there.
Okay. All right. Now I'm super curious because I'm the type of guy. So, like, if you tell me, like, hey, I got something to tell you. Oh, wait, now I can't. I will annoy you until you tell me. Just so you know, that's who you're going to run into.
The story will stay between us when I tell you.
Yes, sir. You know it. What's the latest with you, man? How are you? How are things?
I'm good. Just got back from L.A. I was doing college baseball this weekend down at UCLA, and we had the shocking upset with the number one team in the country, the Bruins, getting bounced in the regional, and Cal Poly was the team that emerged, and they're onto the super regionals. Now, we've gone from 64, and after tonight with all these Game 7s across college baseball, we'll be down to 16 and headed toward the College World Series in Omaha, which starts June 12th.
There you go. Not a guy. I do want to talk hockey in just a moment, but since I saw that you were on the rundown today, of course, for our listeners, Roxy is our buddy from the old Pac-12 network, and obviously we used to talk almost exclusively college football with you. I wanted to get into a couple of college football storylines, and this Brendan Sorsby situation, of course, is making waves around here, Roxy, because Texas Tech won the Big 12 a year ago. Vegas favorite to do it again. Even with the Sorsby stuff out there, prediction markets, anybody that's predicting Big 12 football next year is predicting that it will be Texas Tech, regardless of who's under center. My question to you, though, is, look, I am sensitive to an addiction dynamic, and I'm aware of what gambling does to your brain as far as what a dopamine hit looks like, and we can compare it to other addictions when it comes to drugs and alcohol and, your phone, TV, whatever it is. I mean, we have brain mapping ability now that we know what addiction does to the brain. And I do think, the perfect confluence of events that we're, asking these young men to traverse, where their brains are not fully developed, they get hundreds of thousands of dollars, they can pull up a sports book on their phone and place all these bets. I think we're doing these young men a disservice, but at the same time, it's really the one thing you can't do because it's the one thing that separates college football from WWE. Like, you just can't do it. I don't know how there's a pathway back for Brendan Sorsby to play college football. Maybe he plays in the NFL. But your thoughts on this kind of dynamic we're going through here, and what do you think it means for the Big 12 landscape this year?
Look, Spence, I feel sorry for him, and you brought it up. It's an addiction. And it's a problem, and he was seeking help and treatment to get over this issue. But at the same time, and you also alluded to it, you're breaking the number one rule. You cannot gamble on games. And we've seen it on what happens to people across the board, right? There's people from the NBA that are in jail because of it right now. Pete Rose was banned from baseball because he bet on the sport. And that you just can't do it. It is an absolute no-no. And with the NCAA ruling, look, I get it. He technically has another year of eligibility. But at the same time, you broke a major rule. And that, to me, really borders on should a player be allowed to compete again? And I think he needs to get treatment for this problem. But I also think at the same time, maybe it's cruel, but I don't think he should be playing college football, especially when it's proven that he had these gambling issues and he bet on the sport.
Yeah, and the new information that came out as a result of the court filing, because if this is a couple of bets here and maybe, $5 or $10 there, okay, but hundreds of bets, 90 grand, and was using sportsbooks accounts from friends and family members to kind of continue that smokescreen to remain anonymous while he was making bets. And I hate to make it a football topic, Roxy, but the Will Hammond kid, Texas, their backup rolled into Salt Lake last year and played an awesome game and beat Utah. Utah probably could have won that game if Will Hammond didn't come in and play the way he played. And obviously BYU made the Big 12 championship game a year ago. Does it change the way you think the conference plays out if Texas Tech doesn't have their starting quarterback?
I think there's an effect, yes. But now they're probably still the favorite, and the rumblings about how much money they've spent on their roster. And I don't think they're as much a favorite if he's not there, but to me they're still the favorite. It's going to be a competitive, balanced league, and you look around, and I expect a bounce back from Arizona State this year. But the league in general is definitely on the upswing, but it's there for the taking. And I think if they have Sorsby, there's a little separation. But if they don't, they come back to the pack. And I think it's a much tighter race than people anticipate.
So we do have Congress now getting involved with college football to try to, essentially fix this sport in a way that it badly needs fixing. I don't know if this is going to pass the floor because bipartisan anything these days feels impossible. But what's on the table is limiting athletes to transferring schools only one time without penalty, limiting athlete eligibility to a maximum of 5 years. I can't believe we have to say this out loud, but prohibiting former professional athletes from playing in college. And then prohibiting schools from poaching a coach from another school during their sports season, known as the Lane Kiffin rule. Two-part question. What do you think about kind of the Protect College Sports Act as it's on the table, and what do you think the biggest issue is facing college football right now?
I like some of the initiatives, but the one for me, Spence, is the multi-transfer rule without penalty. That's the biggest issue I have because they're making a mockery of what college athletics is about, and it's already turned into somewhat professional, right, with the money that's being thrown around, and I'm all for them getting paid and benefiting on their name, image, and likeness. I'm cool with that. And the revenue sharing, because they are the ones out there that are sweating and leaving themselves susceptible to injury and laying it all out there for the university. But the multi-transfer without penalty, and it's just glorified free agency is what it is right now. And I do think there need to be some regulations in place because at the end of the day, they're still supposed to be going to school and getting an education. And when you're going from school to school to school, that is just completely making a mockery of what the academics are about. And these kids should be making progress to their degree. When they transfer from school to school to school, they lose credits, it sets them back, and the graduation really becomes secondary to what they're trying to do. And I get it. Look, I loved playing ball too when I was younger. But I'm all for you get the one-time transfer for free. And the second time you transfer, I think you should have to sit no matter what. We've seen those excuses over the years in the past trying to get eligibility, whether it's a family hardship or a family illness. And the NCAA most of the time would cave and they would become eligible. I think there needs to be some hard rules in place for that. But at the same time, as you brought up the poaching coaches, that's also a problem. Because if we're going to do it and hold the players accountable, the coaches who have contracts definitely need to be held accountable. Because right now, none of these contracts matter. The players' contracts, because I'm well aware of players that have signed 2-year deals at schools, and then they just leave, even though there's a buyout potential, but there's nobody to enforce those contracts. But I think that the coaches need to be held accountable also, that they just can't go from school to school to school. Like Will Wade in college basketball, right? Will Wade goes to NC State. All of a sudden, LSU wants to take him back. He jumps. 1 year at NC State when he had a long-term contract. That's not right. But under these rules, he can do it. And you're seeing the free agency not just with the players, but with the coaches also.
All right, before we get over to some hockey stuff, the SEC wants 16 teams in the CFP. The Big Ten wants 24. The Big 12, their coaches okay the 24-team proposal. What do you think the answer is here, Roxy? If you had a voice in the room, what would your opinion be?
I think 16 is the best number, and I hope they're not all 16 SEC teams, which I know the SEC would love. But I think there should be a benefit to being 1 through 4. So maybe you do a double bye for those 1 through 4s, right into the quarterfinals. And then you have in the first round teams playing and then a play-in to advance. But I do believe that even if you expand, you go to 16, I think 24 is way too many, because if you're the 22nd, 23rd, 24th team, you shouldn't be playing for the national championship. Even to me, 16 is a stretch. But Spence, I get it. It's all about money, and there's so much out there, and there's so much revenue available. That's why they want more games. They want more inventory, and they want to be able to sell it and profit and benefit from the money that's out there. And that's why the tournament's expanding, not just because, we feel we could have a better competition. That's not the reason. The reason is because there's more money readily available, and it's all about capitalizing on that. So with that said, I think 16 is the right number. I get it. You're 13, 14 right now. You have a gripe. Maybe you feel you deserve to be in. You go to 16, I think that appeases everybody.
All right, moving over to some hockey stuff. The Mammoth played Vegas very, very tough. Vegas swept Colorado, so the Mammoth are better than Colorado.
Well, conventional wisdom says that, right?
Indeed. Obviously, I kid. But let's do a little Mammoth before we get to the Stanley Cup conversation with Carolina and Vegas. So, mission accomplished this year, and Bill Armstrong, their general manager, I love his approach because there's this pragmatic honesty to him. And he said, after the Mammoth were eliminated, the day after, he said, we will be making changes because they do have some free agents. The Yamamoto kid they've got to decide on. They've got a grip of young kids in the system that might be called up, TJ Ginla and such. But for the Mammoth to take the next step, make the playoffs next year, because Bill said the standard is the standard now. We've set a standard. We are a playoff team. The rebuild is not necessarily over because they're still young, but now we're in the group of teams that should be making the playoffs moving forward. What do they need to add to this roster, Roxy, to kind of continue to grow?
I think they need to add some physicality and some sandpaper to them in terms of the third and fourth line. They have the skill guys, and you alluded to, okay, maybe TJ Ginla can crack the lineup this year, but you're committed to guys like Cooley and Schmaltz, who signed a long-term contract, and Keller and Gunther, and you made the trade for Peterka. These are the guys that you're banking on to be your skill, your goal scorers, and your speed. You need to have that other component, and I still think that's lacking a little bit. Yeah, Liam O'Brien adds some of that, right? But Liam O'Brien is somewhat limited in what he can do, and I think that's what you need, is to have a little size and physicality to the third and fourth lines, to your second level, if you will, of your offensive players. And then defensively, for example, is Simashev ready to make the jump? Because I know they have high expectations from him. Ian Cole's unrestricted free agent, but he's an older guy. And I think they need to get a little bit younger on the blue line as well. I mean, Nate Schmidt, you still got him, for a couple of years? I thought he played well. I thought John Marino played great in the playoffs. But I think they need to get a little bit younger, maybe even a little more athletic defensively. And those are the two areas that I think that when the Utah Mammoth do their autopsy on this season and how can we get better, when Bill Armstrong looks at it, I think those are two areas that I think Bill would like to address with this team to get to the next level. You talked about the jump they made this year. They were right there with Vegas, but they didn't know how to close out a playoff series and win this time of the year. And that's what you're going to have to figure out moving forward. So add some pieces that can help you do it. And I just think they need some physicality, some grit up front to add to that talent they have with all those gunners that can get up and down the ice.
Does feel like there's a bright future for hockey in Salt Lake, right? I mean, I think I think if you're a Mammoth fan, you have a lot to look forward to.
Oh, and there's so much more talent that's coming, right? There's a reason why when you look at the writers that examine the prospect pools for teams across the country and why they're so high on the Utah Mammoth. They're going to have a little bit of money to spend with the cap going up a bit. But now is the time, I think, if you're Utah, to get a little aggressive because you're ready for that next step. When you have these young, talented players that are coming, and there's a number of them that are in the system, highly thought of prospects that this team has. But the next step, okay, how do you get there? And I think that's what Bill Armstrong's trying to figure out with this group.
All right, Roxy, before I say you lose, Carolina finally broke through. I mean, they've been really good for a long, long time. But falling short of the final before this year, and they finally broke through. So not a huge surprise that Carolina's there, but a pretty big surprise that Vegas is there. Lost more games than they won during the regular season. Fired their coach down the stretch, and John Tortorella. I know he's a bit of a lightning rod. He coached my Rangers. He coached everywhere, but my goodness, they pulled off quite the run here. What do you make of this matchup? And at this point, what's your gut saying as far as who's going to hoist that cup?
Well, we had to make our predictions on ESPN.com, and I chose Carolina in 7. I think this is a long series. The way that they are playing right now, Vegas, that this was a team I think everybody expected, right? They underachieved. There's no other way to say it during the season, but they did enough clearly to win the Pacific Division. And then John Tortorella kind of gives them that kick in the rear, and it's a veteran group that has hit their stride. When you have guys like Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner, these are high-end talents. But the other players that come on, like Brett Howden has been unbelievable in these playoffs, and I don't think anybody saw that from him. And then Tortorella had the ultimate confidence in Carter Hart that this is the goaltender we're going with. And even though Aiden Hill backstopped them to a cup, Carter Hart was the guy for Torts. And this team has just rallied around this group. They've gotten healthy. William Karlsson coming back is a huge boost. And it changes them, makes them so much stronger down the middle. He's an excellent penalty killer and a two-way center, is great in the circle. And that's what has made Vegas much stronger. And it's crazy. They've gotten better as the playoffs have gone on. With the war of attrition, teams kind of, all right, who's left standing? And on the other side with Carolina, their depth that they have and the depth scoring that Carolina has. And they're so fundamentally sound. Their penalty kill is outstanding. And defensively, when you have Stahl, controlling things in the middle, and Jacob Slavin, to me, is the best shutdown defenseman in the league. Carolina Hurricanes, this is a team that has just really been excelling in the postseason. They have hit their stride as well, and it's fitting that the two teams that are playing the best are now meeting each other for the Cup. And I think we're going to get treated to a heck of a series.
Last thing, do you have more beef with Courtney Cox or Billy Corgan?
Courtney Cox,
okay,
because it's a little more personal. How's that?
Fair enough. I cannot wait to hear this story, Roxy. I appreciate your time, my friend. Be safe, okay?
All right, Spence. You got it, brother.
All right, buddy. Roxy Bernstein, old school Pac-12 network friend. He's with ESPN Radio. Very busy guy. I always appreciate Roxy's time. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Final hour of the show is next on ESPN 700. All right, we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. Didn't have a ton of time to get to it today, but in an email sent to athletic department employees and obtained by the Salt Lake Tribune, Mark Harlan described some firings that are happening as, quote, impacted employees of an unsettling process during the transition to this new company. There was an official response from the athletic department that said, quote, in preparation for the growth of Crimson brand partners, the university has begun the process of transitioning selected units of some university operations to the new company. The first step of that process requires the discontinuation of the individual positions in those units through a reduction in force to be followed by the CBP's hiring process. Well, they're learning to speak private equity language up at the University of Utah. Look, a couple things here. This is a sensitive thing when it comes to people's jobs. I hate to say I told you so, but this is right out of the playbook of private equity. It's what they do. They invest a bunch of money into an entity expecting a very healthy return, and as part of that process, people are treated like line items. The sad reality of the deal. I was able to get some information on this that, again, we're going to unpack a little bit more tomorrow. The hope and expectation of the people that I've spoke to at the University of Utah that the employees impacted by the meetings on Friday will be rehired. All of them? I don't know. My guess is probably not. Because, again, this is out of the playbooks of private equity. And when you decide to get in bed with a private equity company, you make a deal oftentimes that is going to be adverse to certain individual people that aren't seen to be valued by your new partner. That's just how it goes. I hate to tell you this, but the private equity guys at Otro Capital don't care that Bob up at the University of Utah has 3 kids and a mortgage. If they think he's expendable, he's going to go. So there's a lot of meat on this bone. We didn't have a ton of time to get to it today, but we will unpack it a little bit more tomorrow on the program. And for anybody that's been impacted by this, I feel for you. I hope you get your jobs back. All right, quiet night in the world of sports tonight. The Stanley Cup final will begin tomorrow between Carolina and they're going to take on, of course, Vegas, who beat the Utah Mammoth in round 1. A.J. Brown is officially a New England Patriot. Myles Garrett is an L.A. Ram, if you missed that. Russell Wilson is going to retire from the NFL to work for CBS. So there's that. NBA Finals will get going coming up on Wednesday between the Knicks and the Spurs. You can hear that game on this radio station. All right, Porter, before we get out of here, to have a quiet Monday evening with not a lot going on, what's coming up on a Tuesday edition of the show?
Yeah, Tuesday edition of The Drive. We'll see Tim McMahon for your NBA Daily Assist. Sarah Todd talking some Jazz and NBA as well. Dave Fox will stop by the program, and we'll go from there.
There you go. I'll be on TV with Dave tomorrow night, 10:35 KMYU. We call it 5 Questions with Spence. I was on with my guy Adam Mikulich last night. Coming up tomorrow, I'm going to release it'll be episode 9 of the podcast, but part 2 of my conversation with my dad in time for the NBA Finals. My dad, Dave Checketts, was with the Knicks running the Garden when the Knicks were last in the finals in 1999. So we have some fun story time tomorrow. That's called Reality Check with Spence Checketts, available where you get your shows. Special thank you today to Bill Riley, Richard Smith, Lee Ellis, and Roxy Bernstein. If you miss any of it, go to the website, ESPN700sports.com. Download the mobile app, take us on the go, then check out this podcast page, which is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, also available wherever you get your shows. He's Porter, I'm Spence, saying goodnight. Have a great Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday edition of The Drive, and as always, you can catch it right here on ESPN 700.